My fusion system. Fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapters 196 to 210. Chapter 195. You can be proud of yourself. Absolute Zero was a platinum tier ice elemental spell, and it was not only that. The essence of the spell was to control magical elements. It used space and time to freeze them. It was considered a fusion spell because the Golden Flash had that spell. Therefore, Watson was very familiar with it. You mastered a high-tier spell? Absolute Zero? Sylvan seemed a little surprised. Watson, he thought, was already excellent enough to be on the verge of platinum at that age. He had not expected Watson to be so knowledgeable about platinum-tier spells. He had underestimated his adversary. Unfortunately, he did not realize it until it was too late. Sylvan extended his right hand toward Watson. The dragon-shaped flames around his body immediately flew in the direction of Watson in an attempt to stop the cold air's approach. Unfortunately, it was useless. The thick and long fire dragon flew more than 10 meters in front of Watson before it began to collapse and shrink. The flames had weakened. It was only the size of a hand when it came in front of Watson, and the boy blew on it. Kacha, kacha. The sound of freezing rang out, and the ice permanently trapped the flames. Who had ever a flame that encased in ice? The fire that was no longer burning was like a work of art in the center of the ice block. Cold breath spewed from his mouth. Watson's hair and brows were encrusted with frost. His body could not endure that even as a gold-tier warrior. Even as a spell caster, he had ended in such a state. Sylvan, who was in the middle of the attack, was in an even worse predicament. A layer of frost had formed on his garments and limbs before the flame on his body was extinguished. He gritted his teeth. That forced Sylvan to retreat rapidly. He enhanced the transfer of the magical power, but it was still ineffective in slowing the spread of ice on his body. Wait, Watson, let's pause that battle for a moment. Lord Sylvan, you initiated the conflict, and now you want to stop it. Don't you think you talk too much? Unfortunately, I do not intend to quit until the winner is determined. I recently learned a platinum tier fusion spell, and I'll let you test its power. Silvermoon of Endless Reincarnation. Watson chanted a difficult and mysterious language. It was not the present-day language but a language from 10,000 years ago, the Loan language. No one in the room understood it. They could only sense the power in those words. The language was swift and smooth, and Watson quickly completed the spell. The sky's original flaming red tint faded and was replaced with a silver-white color. An enormous illusory moon that spanned for hundreds of meters appeared in the midst of the silver-white light. Sylvan's movements were slowed when the moonlight gathered into a pillar and surrounded him. The moon was clearly visible at the foot of the Dragonspine snow mountain. Sylvan's body was encased in frost, and the ice on his body swiftly thickened at that instant, thanks to the illusory moonlight. He had turned into an ice sculpture before he could resist it. He looked lifelike inside the ice sculpture as he maintained his escape posture. What, Lord Sylvan lost? Nightingale opened her mouth wide as she gazed at Sylvan's ice sculpture. She wished she could say something, but she could not. She felt a chill in her spine, and her thoughts became foggy. It was difficult to think. The moon in the sky seemed to have dragged her spirit away. The majority of the shadow guards were like that as well. The moonlight shone not only on Sylvan but on everyone in the room. The light engulfed everyone, magical beasts and the astrologer alike, and their ability to think and move had been reduced. The astrologer was the first to lift the restriction. A layer of brilliant starlight was found on his body, and it obstructed the moonlight in the sky. He flashed in front of Watson and stared at him strangely. Watson felt goosebumps all over his body. Master, why are you looking at me like that? Watson, you know the Loan language from 10,000 years ago, and you even know how to use it to chant a spell. I have studied the Loan language for a long time, but even I could not do that. How did you learn to do that? He was the most knowledgeable mage in the kingdom. How could Watson know something that even he did not know? The Loan language was distinct from their language then. It was a powerful language. A spell cast in that language was more powerful than a typical spell. That had something to do with the essence of magic, which by nature, sought resonance with the world through its own magical elements and the manner it was chanted. The language was merely a vehicle for resonance. The degree of resonance between various languages and the world varied. For example, dragon language magic, unique to the dragon race, was far more potent than the magic that humans had mastered. That was because the dragon language was older, more mysterious, and more powerful than human language. The Loan language was one of the most powerful of all languages. After all, that was the tongue in which the gods previously conversed. Unfortunately, it was too old, and most of the language was lost. Aside from the language, the astrologer was shocked by the platinum-tier spell that Watson had unleashed. He had not taught Watson such a potent spell. Perhaps Sylvan had done that? The astrologer turned to face Sylvan and promptly discarded that notion. Sylvan was frozen. How could it have gotten so bad if he had taught Watson that? Master, from whom did you learn the Loan language? I accidentally learned it while I was gazing at the content on the ruins walls. Accidentally? Those words stung the astrologer. He held his forehead and sighed. All right, let's just take it as what it is. He might not have trusted Watson a few days earlier, but after he saw what Watson had done, he no longer had any qualms about that. His apprentice was a brilliant student who could learn everything in an instant. He had even figured things out by looking at the Loan language. Was there an issue with that? That kind of language has an enormous impact on the development of magic in the kingdom. I need to find an opportunity to ask Watson for the complete version of the language. The astrologer made up his mind and immediately felt a little emotional. He had not taught Watson in a few days, and then he had to learn from his disciple. He was not a qualified master. Master, we can talk about the runes later. Let's solve the problem in front of us first. I just learned the spell to freeze the border count. I'm not very familiar with it, so I can't undo it. Do you have a solution, Master? Watson's voice interrupted his thoughts. When he looked up, he noticed Watson pointing to the frozen Sylvan nearby. He looked a little uncomfortable, as if he was worried that Sylvan would die. On the one hand, he wanted to test the spell that he had just learned. On the other hand, he felt that the border count was too powerful, so he did not hold back. He did not expect he could freeze the man so easily. According to the Silver Moon of Endless Reincarnation's description, the moon in the sky would absorb Sylvan's soul and become stronger. It would be weird if he accidentally killed Sylvan. Don't worry about him. He is not that weak, the astrologer said indifferently. Yes, I am not that weak to be killed by a child. The voice came from behind him. Watson's pupils contracted. He turned around and found a slender hand in front of his eyes. It quickly enlarged, and a finger tapped on his forehead heavily. With a muffled sound, Watson took more than 10 steps backward. He felt his mind go blank, and his soul was about to be separated from his body. Watson, this is payback for the spell you cast on me. If I did not know the time-stripping spell, that attack might have injured me. The only person on the entire border who can force me to that extent is you, Watson. You can be proud of yourself. Watson struggled to shake his head. He raised his head to see Sylvan standing in front of him. His purple hair had become white and had a faint glow. Even though his lashes and brows had assumed the color of light, they twisted upward in a way that defied gravity. The absolute zero spell that sealed Sylvan had already turned into a sea of ice fragments. Chapter 196. Why did you destroy the ruins? The border count also knew the time-stripping spell? That spell was the reason he lost to an astrologer the last time. Sylvan's time-stripping spell appeared to be on par with the astrologer's spell, if not stronger than that. Under the pure white body, there was a power that was hundreds of times stronger than before. That power made him shudder from the bottom of his heart. Phew, Nightingale, who was on the sidelines watching the battle, exhaled a sigh of relief. She felt relieved. She had foreseen Lord Sylvan to lose, but as expected, Lord Sylvan's might would not be conquered so easily. It seemed like the scenario had reversed. Watson's strength was not insignificant. He had forced Sylvan, who was the strongest mage in the kingdom, to that extent. That kid was not even comparable to her a few months ago, but it seemed like he had progressed to such a level. Nightingale sighed. It was what she had expected of the border count's child. He had good genes. She was there when the astrologer and Sylvan discussed whether Watson was his illegitimate child. She heard Lord Sylvan acknowledge Watson's identity, so she stood by and watched the battle as it progressed. She did not stop it. It was a father-son showdown, so she did not interfere. Watson, the battle is over. If you admit your mistake now and give me the rights to explore the ruins, I'll let it go. After he entered the time-stripping spell state, Sylvan's voice overlapped, as if countless of himself spoke simultaneously. Who said I lost? Watson put down the hand that was rubbing his forehead and clenched his fists. What other trump cards do you have? Do you want to cast the time-stripping spell like I did? I advise you not to waste your energy. Among all the spells Sylvan had mastered, the time-stripping spell had the most significant strength. The only spell that could withstand it was the same time-stripping spell. At the same time, that also had the highest cost to pay. The time-stripping spell would force him to weaken himself to take power from his past self constantly. In other words, it would take time to accumulate. He had stayed dormant at the border for 10 years to nurture that spell. He could only summon a maximum of 3,000 of his past selves. How old was Watson? How many past selves could he obtain when he was only 10 years old? How could he compare to him? With that thought in mind, Sylvan noticed Watson take a deep breath and begin to chant the spell in Loan. Watson had tasted the sweetness after he tried to cast the spell in the Loan language. Watson's body condensed a layer of time aura as the spell formed. It was a prelude to the release of the time-stripping spell, but it was not exactly the same. When Sylvan noticed the long river above Watson's head, he attempted to figure out what was unusual. It was the long river of time, and he could see the ancient castle ruins and shifting mountains and rivers in the distance. More than 20 people walked out of the long river of time slowly. They looked like Watson, and their bodies had a platinum-tier aura as they arrived at Watson's side. This is time-stripping? What kind of spell is this? Sylvan was dumbfounded. Time-stripping was a spell that would fuse one's past selves into one's body, but the spell that Watson had used summoned his past selves instead. While he was puzzled about that, Watson brought more than 20 identical copies of himself and rushed at him. At the same time, he spread his arms, and the world tree branches flew out one by one and broke into wooden cards. The starlight that fused with the sky turned into golden cards. There were 24 people there. Watson had created 24 cards and fused them into each of them. He cast the God's Descent spell, and the clones immediately turned into mythical creatures. There was a god who carried a scepter and wore a garment full of eyes, which symbolized the fool. There was also a high-tier being who personified travel and lightning. He was known as Hermes. There was also a war god on a golden chariot and an angel with wings on his back. He held a horn in one hand and a longsword in the other. Watson's projection of the river of time had the potential to pull his previous selves out of the gaps in history, but it had a weakness. His past selves could not carry any tools, so Watson used his original body to create the golden cards and gave his doppelgangers the ability to cast the God's Descent spell. Then, he activated the Great Sin Mask, which had been fused with the World Tree's shadow. Roar! A deafening roar erupted. Watson's body was engulfed in black gas, which ballooned as if it were inflating. It grew into a massive black whale with a length of hundreds of meters. It had spikes on its back and a long snake-shaped tail that swayed behind it. It had huge fangs on its abdomen and mouth. The sharp fangs dissolved the snow-covered ground and turned it into a quicksand vortex. That was Leviathan, the Envy Beast and a Great Sin Beast. It could force equality and shadow clones. The moment the 24 mythical creatures and the Great Sin Beast appeared, the base of the Dragonspine snow mountain boiled. Hundreds of thousands of magical beasts felt the pressure in their souls and knelt in unison. Then the Shadow Guards, including Nightingale, knelt too. That was the Bloodline's repression. The magical beast and mythical creatures in front of them were superior to them. That must be Leviathan, the Envy Beast. People said that it often roams the sea and could control tsunamis. It's a terrifying magical beast. I don't know the creatures around it, but judging from their aura, they must be comparable to the Great Sin Beast. How can a person turn into so many monsters? What kind of magic is that? A few shadow guards knelt on the ground. Their voices trembled when they spoke. They had experienced great storms, but they were still shocked by that scene. They were no match for any of the monsters that Watson had turned into, and there were 24 of those beasts. It was no surprise. Watson's combat strength was already at its peak when he combined a peak platinum tier spell and tool. Roar! Watson, who had transformed into the magical beast Leviathan, roared again. A massive vortex suddenly appeared beneath Sylvan's feet. Countless shadow arms reached out from within to wrap around him. It gradually weakened the powerful aura that his body emanated. That was the envy beast's forced equality skill. It could force his opponent down to his skill level. Interesting. Sylvan's attitude changed as he stared at the 25 gigantic monsters of various shapes and sizes in front of him. Instead, things took a severe turn. Since that's the case, I won't hold back any longer. Come out now. Peak Platinum Tier Fusion Spell, Super Elemental Giant Summon. The vortex beneath his feet vanished as soon as he spoke, and the shadow's arms shattered. The ground continued to churn in its position, and enormous giant rock golems climbed up one by one. They towered over 100 meters above the ground. They even blocked the sun's rays. Other than the rock golems, there were lava golems as well. Hot lava flowed on their body as the smaller rocks on them whirled in the green storm. They were not connected. At least 50 elemental giants sprang from the ground and crashed with Watson's transformed behemoth. A violent storm was formed by the collision of roughly 100 platinum-tier beasts. The ring-shaped wind, which had shattered rocks, flames, and frost, dispersed in all directions. Cracks appeared on the ground soon after, and Dragonspine Snow Mountain next to them was plagued with holes as well. The entire world seemed to be in the grip of an apocalypse. A massive rock golem hugged a mythical creature with 8 limbs and 3 heads on its back. A storm giant and a mythological creature with dense and enormous wings on its back were fighting. They conjured thunderstorms of their own. Sylvan and Watson were in the thick of the battlefield. Sylvan embedded himself inside the body of a giant rock golem and engaged in combat with the Leviathan, the envy beast that Watson had transformed into. The ground beneath them sank a few centimeters. They fought and conversed at the same time. Do you notice the difference between you and me, Watson? I must say that you are quite gifted, but that is all. I will reiterate what I already said. I will forgive you as long as you admit your mistake. Border count, what are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Is there a difference between us? I can't feel it anyway. Do you really dare say that? I'll teach you a good lesson today. Following that, continuous sounds of collisions were heard. Those two guys are father and son, indeed. They're really cut from the same mold. They can get so angry in a fight. Nightingale and a couple of shadow guards were in front of the astrologer. He looked up at the sky as he flipped his right palm to release a layer of protective shield for them. Stop fighting. The surrounding terrain will be damaged as a result of your battle. It will not be beneficial to anyone if the ruins are destroyed. Crack. Almost as soon as he finished his words, the astrologer saw a crack in the ancient ruins in front of him. The Leviathan behemoth that Watson had transformed into was pressed onto the Dragonspine Snow Mountain by the giant rock golem controlled by Sylvan. That happened to be the location of the ruins. DMN it. I knew that your fight would destroy the ruins. Those ruins are from 10,000 years ago. The words, items, and even a stone in there are all treasures. Do you know how much value you will lose if you destroy it? The astrologer looked at the Dragonspine Snow Mountain with heartache. He used a spell to amplify his voice. However, it seemed that they did not hear what he had said. Watson and Sylvan fought even more fiercely. At that time, it was Watson's turn to wave Leviathan's thick and long tail. The giant rock golem's neck snapped before it was thrown onto the wall of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. It added 2 new cracks to the ruins. I told you to stop fighting. Did you not hear me? You're destroying the ruins. When the astrologer saw that the ruins were about to be destroyed, he grew enraged and cast the time-stripping spell. His body was imbued with a diamond-tier aura. It gave him a youthful and attractive appearance. Then he stomped his foot, and it caused the earth to crumble around him. Whether it was Watson's clone or Sylvan's summoned giant, they all vanished into thin air among the tremors. The ruins on the walls of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain also disappeared with them. The ruins could not endure the collapse because they had been devastated for an extended period and then were subjected to such intense vibrations. Snowflakes and broken rocks pelted the ground. When the astrologer glanced at his masterpiece, his angry expression froze. Meanwhile, Watson and Sylvan deactivated their transformations at the same time and looked in his direction. They had strange expressions on their faces as they spoke in unison. Master, why did you destroy the ruins? Chapter 197. Mass-producing the wish for the world ring. Who destroyed the ruins? The astrologer snorted coldly. Which one of you saw me destroy the ruins? He had simply wished to halt Watson and Sylvan's battle, but he had not controlled his power well enough, so it caused the ruins to collapse. Who could blame him? He would not have stood up to stop it if it had not been for the fight between Watson and Sylvan. Nothing would have happened if he had not stood up to stop them. He would not have lost his cool if the ruins were fine. In a nutshell, it was not his fault. Master, at this point, it seems too late for you to explain yourself. Sylvan had a helpless look on his face. The astrologer's expression became solemn as he heard his remarks. Sylvan, are you saying that this was my fault? Just because you are the border count and have great power, do not assume you can accuse me arbitrarily. You will always be the little boy who dragged his sister from the Forest of Eternity and came to live in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. I dare not. Sylvan's face became gloomy. The effects of the time-stripping spell on his body faded swiftly, and his body, which was emitting white light, gradually returned to its natural color. He did not dare to forget the astrologer's kindness, so he did not intend to continue to say anything, whether the astrologer had done it or not. That's right. The astrologer, who had transformed into a handsome man, flashed a bright smile that was enough to entice thousands of girls. At that moment, a young voice echoed from nearby Sylvan. Master, it is obvious that you were the one who demolished those ruins. Don't even get started on the eyes. It is even visible through my nose. The astrologer's smile froze when he heard those remarks. When Sylvan turned around, he realized that the person who had spoken was Watson. His expression was somewhat pitiful. As the astrologer's former disciple, he was fully aware of his teacher's admiration for him. If he enraged the astrologer, he would undoubtedly suffer his rage. Watson, I'll give you another chance. Are you sure that I destroyed the ruins? The astrologer's face looked grave, and his voice was low. Sylvan's heart thumped. He thought that the astrologer was furious. I am pretty convinced you destroyed the ruins, Master. Those 10,000-year-old ruins belong to Black Moon Castle. Since you destroyed it, it is equal to destroying our property. We must get compensation. Watson's comments were loud and forceful. When Sylvan heard that, he subconsciously covered his face and shook his head a few times. Watson, what compensation do you want? Now that the ruins are destroyed, it's impossible for you to restore them, Master. I can only rely on myself. I'll use the wish for the world ring. I can still make a wish today. I can make a wish to restore the ruins if you allow me to use your lifespan, Master. Quote, he wanted to use the astrologer's lifespan? Sylvan's mouth was wide open. Watson's request was becoming increasingly ludicrous to him. He would be enraged if he heard such a request, let alone the astrologer. However, the astrologer was not as enraged as he had anticipated. Instead, he wore a skeptical face. Well, how many years of my life do you intend to squander away? I feel that 100 years is enough to repair the ruins. If it's not enough, I'll let you decide. Watson, even though I am immortal, I will grow old with time. When I grow old, my legs will not be as good, and my teeth will fall out. At the same time, I will suffer from insomnia and dreams. Do you have the heart to let your master suffer like that? When the astrologer heard that he would have to pay with more than 100 years of his life, he said, I know that losing the ruins is not a small matter to you, so I apologize. Since you have mastered the Loan language, we don't need those ruins. When I go back, I will teach you 3 magic spells every week as compensation. How about that? At least 4. Watson extended 4 fingers, and the astrologer nodded obediently. Okay, 4. What had happened? Sylvan was hypnotized. He expected the astrologer to be angry, but the truth surprised him. Why did the astrologer chastise him when he responded respectfully? Watson, on the other hand, was treated with respect when he criticized the astrologer. Why was there such a disparity in their treatment? Before he could respond, he heard Watson say, in addition to teaching me 4 magic spells every day, I also want the border count to give me the remaining 5 Nibling rings as compensation. He is partly to blame for the destruction of the ruins too. Then, I can make a wish with the rings. That way, I might be able to repair the damage. Okay, I can agree to that request. The astrologer hurriedly nodded and looked at Sylvan after hearing that the ruins could be restored. What are you waiting for, Sylvan? Give him the Nibling rings. In any case, Watson had fused your original rings. Why don't you give him the rest since they are no longer useful to you? Master, are you serious? Sylvan's mouth opened wider. Do you think I'm joking with you? The astrologer waved his hand impatiently. Sylvan, just because you're the border count and have great power, do not think that you can reject my orders so easily. In my eyes, you'll always be the little boy who brought his sister out of the forest of eternity and came to live in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. What? Sylvan wanted to curse, but unfortunately, it was hard to disobey his master's orders. He could only endure the unwillingness and give the 5 Niblinger rings to Watson. Here, these are the remaining rings. Even though I don't know what you're going to do, but... Lord Sylvan, don't worry. I'll use these 5 rings properly. Watson smiled as he took the 5 rings. The 24 world tree branches appeared in his palm. They broke into golden cards and fused with the ring as he activated the system fusion. Then, a brand new ring appeared in Watson's hand. The effect was the same as the previous one. Watson placed the ring on the middle finger of his right hand and slowly twisted it. He was satisfied with the ring in his hand. Producing 2 sets of astrology tarot cards in a single day had quickly depleted his energy. It even shook the source of chaotic elemental magic in his body. His face was pale, yet he was in a pleasant mood. The 2 wish for the world rings meant he could make 6 wishes a day. If only there were more such rings, Watson thought regretfully. If he could wear a wish for the world ring on every finger, he did not even have to fight anyone. He just had to make a wish to make his enemy suffer from a sudden illness or be crushed to death by a passing meteor. If only there were a way to duplicate the wish for the world rings, or if there were more than 10 Niblinger rings. Wait, Watson had a thought. A light flashed in his mind. He seemed to have grasped onto something. Master, get ready. I'm going to make a wish. Okay, you can start. The astrologer waved his arm, indicating that he was ready. I'm going to make a wish and get 5 more Niblinger rings. Was he not going to make a wish to restore the ruins? The astrologer was patiently waiting for Watson to rebuild the ruins. His demeanor changed abruptly when he heard the unexpected wish. Then his face, which had become attractive after he used the time-stripping spell, began to age quickly. He returned to his old appearance and exclaimed, Watson, you little B*****, lied to me again. I knew you could not repair the ruins like that. Congratulations, Master, for realizing the wish. The price is 500 years of the lifespan of a man named Antonio. 5 identical Niblinger rings appeared in Watson's hand. My second wish is to restore all my physical strength. This wish is relatively simple. It will only consume 10 years of Antonio's lifespan. Watson's body glowed with light as his wish was granted, and he felt energized. He immediately extended a world tree branch, fashioned it into a golden card, and fused it with the ring he had obtained from the wish. It became the 3rd wish for the world ring. It works. Watson could not help but smile smugly as he held the ring in his fingers. He could not cheat with the wish for the world ring. He could not ask for another 100 wishes, nor could he make a direct copy of it. The ring could only grant wishes, so its copy would not have the same ability. However, it was a different case for the Niblinger rings. 10 Niblinger rings would grant him the ability to make a wish, and Watson wanted 5 of those. It would not lead to any paradox in producing wish items or the number of wishes made. Watson's eyes brightened when he discovered the method for mass-producing that item. The first thing that came to his mind was that if everyone in Black Moon Castle had such a ring, he pondered how powerful Black Moon Castle would become if that were the case. 1 wave of wishes could double the resources of Black Moon Castle. The second wish could quadruple their resources, and so on. With those rings, their resources would multiply rapidly, like locusts breeding their young. I'm rich. Of course, there were flaws in that plan. After all, the duplicated Niblinger rings were platinum-tier items. It would require 500 years of the astrologer's lifespan. If too many rings were duplicated, the astrologer might become old and weak due to the rapid loss of lifespan, and that was something Watson did not want to see. He loved his master very much, so he decided to make fewer rings for the time being. I want to make a wish. First, make me 100 Niblinger rings. Congratulations, Master, for the fulfillment of your wish. That wish will consume 10,000 years of the lifespan of a man named Antonio. Chapter 198. The Changes in the Ruins. Watson's palm glowed with light as the notification rang in his head, and 100 rings appeared in an instant. I want to make a wish to recover all my strength. Watson made that wish without hesitation and began to use the world tree branches to construct golden cards to merge with the nibbling rings. Watson would need 24 cards for every 5 nibbling rings he fused. At the same time, he had to make a wish to regain his strength, which would exhaust 10 years of the astrologer's lifespan. When he successfully fused 100 nibbling rings into 20 wish for the world ring during that cycle, he had already used up 20,200 years of the astrologer's lifespan. The 20 rings emitted dazzling starlight. Watson wore 8 of them on his remaining fingers, so there were still 12 rings available. He picked one out and handed it to Sylvan after some deliberation. "Lord Sylvan, I couldn't have created these rings without the nibbling rings that you've given me. In return, I shall give you this ring. We don't owe each other anything." Sylvan took the ring and carefully examined it. He found that the ring's ability was as Watson had said, indeed. It could make 3 wishes, and each wish would only cost half the price. That was the first time he had seen Watson fuse a platinum tier item. He did not know what that ability was, but it had shocked him. Sylvan's focus shifted from the wish for the world ring to Watson. How could it be easier to master the wish for the world than to mentor Watson? If he could mentor Watson, then he could master an endless stream of wish for the world rings. Sylvan decided to look for an opportunity to ask Watson to see if he could find out how to fuse platinum tier items. He had not paid much attention to Watson when he had heard that he could fuse weapons and spells because the items he fused were all silver and gold tier items. That level of material would not be of much help to him. However, it was different for platinum tier items. While he was thinking, Watson had brought the remaining 11 rings to Nightingale and the others and began to distribute the rings. While he considered that, Watson arrived with the remaining rings and distributed them to Nightingale and the others. "Sven, this ring is yours. You've contributed a lot to the exploration of the ruins these few days, so this ring is your reward. You have to work harder in the future to get more rewards." "Thank you, young Master Watson. I will definitely devote my life to you and Black Moon Castle in the future." Sven held his breath. He appeared ecstatic after he accepted the ring. He was merely a silver tier warrior, but he possessed a platinum tier item. He had informed Watson everything he knew about the ruins and brought them to the Misty Forest, as planned. "I'll give the second ring to Miss Nightingale." Watson generously handed a wish for the world ring to Nightingale and put it on her index finger. He smiled and said, "I hope you will come to Black Moon Castle as a guest in the future, Miss Nightingale." Watson was very close to Nightingale. After all, she had helped train the Black Moon Knights with a lot of effort in the past. As for the remaining rings, Watson muttered. He felt the eager eyes of the shadow guards beside Nightingale. As he heard their gulps, he deliberately put the rings away. "I won't give them to you for now. If you can help me with the exploration of the ruins, maybe I'll give you one when I'm in a good mood." Those shadow guards were the border count's subordinates, so it meant more to stay by his side to monitor him. He wanted to change that situation and get the approval of those people. "Don't worry, young Master Watson. We will help you explore more ruins to your satisfaction." The group of shadow guards began to roll up their sleeves. Initially, they were only loyal to the border count, but now they decided to help Watson on the basis of their loyalty to the border count. They could not resist the temptation of the platinum tier item in front of them. "All right, the rings have been distributed. I'm going to start repairing the ruins." Watson was delighted with the reactions of the shadow guards in front of him. At that moment, a weak voice echoed from not far away from him. "Watson, you stinky brat, what about me? You used me to create so many platinum tier items. Don't you intend to give me some compensation?" The one who spoke was the astrologer. His body was hunched, and his appearance was much older than before that. His hair was sparse, and his teeth were loose. There were also many age spots on his face. "Of course, I won't forget you, Master. I prepared a big gift for you a long time ago." Watson chuckled and opened his right hand, which was filled with rings. "I want to make a wish. I wish for my master to return to his youth. I'm willing to pay the price with 8 wish to the world rings." "Master, it is not possible to fulfill your wish. You will need to consume at least 10 wish to the world rings. Then, use 2 more rings. Congratulations, your wish has been fulfilled." Following the voice in his mind, cracks appeared on the 8 rings that Watson had put away, as well as the rings on his 2 thumbs. All of them shattered with a cracking sound and turned into ashes. At the same time, an invisible force enveloped the astrologer's body, causing his sparse hair to become thick. The deep wrinkles on his face gradually softened, and his turbid eyes became clear. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed from an old man to a young man in his 20s. His platinum hair flickered with a faint luster, and his handsome face was enough to charm thousands of girls. His hunched body had straightened too. The astrologer had looked the same as when he had cast the time-stripping spell. He was not young for a short period, but his appearance was fixed for a long time. He raised his hand and looked at his slender and pale fingers, and his arms were lean too. The astrologer was speechless. "Master, I have been meaning to tell you something. When you led the Mage Guild to attack Black Moon Castle, I agreed to be your disciple on the surface, but I actually hated you. However, after seeing your selflessness these past few days, I believe that you do see me as your disciple. In return, I have to do something. I didn't know what I can do to please you, but I have an idea now." Watson bowed to the astrologer and thanked him sincerely. "Perhaps allowing you to return to your youth is the greatest way to repay you, Master. If 10 rings were not enough, I am prepared to shatter all the rings on my finger. That would fulfill my wish. Fortunately, 10 rings had sufficed. Thank you very much, Master. Thank you for your time and effort." He had deceived the astrologer many times over the past few days. Not only did he want to obtain benefits, but he also wanted to see if the astrologer would be angry or if he were sincere toward him. He knew that there was no need to continue testing the old man. The young astrologer looked at Watson with a helpless and gentle gaze. "Antonio." "What? Don't call me Lord Astrologer, call me Antonio." Antonio rubbed the corners of his eyes, and his fingertips were a little wet. "Antonio is my real name. It's too strange to have you call me Lord Astrologer. Just like how you sincerely regarded me as your master, Watson, you are also the most outstanding disciple I have taught in my life. There was no one better than you in the past, and I don't think there will be any in the future." In the beginning, he had only taken Watson as his disciple because of his talent, and he saw a shadow of someone else in Watson. However, his heart was touched when he heard Watson's words. It turned out that Watson had given him some serious considerations. He did not give the astrologer the wish for the world ring because he wanted to help the astrologer regain his youth. He had never been married or had children, but he felt that his children would look like Watson. He did not know if it was because he was old, but Antonio felt like crying. "I understand, Lord, Master Antonio." Watson nodded. "Since you have become young again, can I continue to use your lifespan to replenish those broken rings, Master? After all, to restore your lifespan, 2 of the rings on my hand are now broken." Restoring Antonio's lifespan took only 10 rings, and his lifespan could create 20 rings. That was consistent with the input-output of a relationship. There would be more things as long as it was continuously depleted. "You little b*** starred, I was moved for nothing. So, helping me restore my youth was not a gift at all, but rather, you wanted to use more of my lifespan. Do you know that repeatedly using up one's life is the cruelest punishment in the world? Are you trying to torture me to death?" Antonio frowned and glared at Watson. However, his anger was not enough. As soon as he finished speaking, he and Watson looked at each other and laughed simultaneously. Sylvan stood in the distance and watched that scene. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he moved his lips and did not say anything. His eyes flickered with envy. When he and Antonio had become master and disciple, they had always maintained a respectful relationship. Even though Antonio was very good to him, he could still feel the distance. It was nothing like what Antonio and Watson had, a noisy but good relationship. Perhaps Antonio did not want a disciple who was respectful to him. Instead, he wanted a family member who would stand up and criticize him when he was wrong, accompany him when he was sad, and occasionally act coquettishly with him to ask for benefits. That was the difference between him and Watson, and it was also the reason Antonio's attitude toward the two of them was completely different. Crack! Sylvan was still lamenting when a shattering sound caught his attention. He turned around and saw a force had shaken the shattered pieces of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Then something rustled from within the mountain. It was as if something terrifying was about to burst out of it. Chapter 199. The Experiment at the Snowy Mountain Peak. The changes in the ruins rapidly drew the attention of everyone there. Broken stones were continually flung out of the crumbling ruins. A sinister black aura lingered around them, and the rocks that were covered by it plummeted into the snow. In no time, a deep pit appeared in the snow. The black aura had initially seeped out from the ruins' debris, but it swiftly drilled out from other places. It joined and clung to the summit of Dragonspine Snow Mountain, turning the previously snow-white mountain peak black. That black atmosphere seems to have emptied the entire Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Sylvan, what did you do to the ruins? Antonio, who was in his 20s again, turned around and looked at Sylvan. His voice was gentle and pleasant. Master, I did not do anything. Sylvan shook his head in response to seeing Antonio in such a state. It's best if that's the case. Watson places a high value on that ruin. I will let you get punished if you do anything to trigger changes in the ruins. Sylvan was dumbstruck. Sylvan took a deep breath. When had he ever felt so betrayed as a border count? However, the person in front of him was Antonio. He could not offend him, regardless of his strength or identity. He already knew why Antonio was good toward Watson, and he only wanted to say one thing. There was nothing wrong with Antonio liking Watson, but could he treat Sylvan a little better? After all, he was Watson's supposed father. How could he punish the father for the sake of the child? How did the Dragonspine Snow Mountain turn black? What's with that black aura? Why do I feel dizzy just by looking at it? Be on alert. There seemed to be many magical beasts appearing on the peak of the mountain. Some of the shadow guards bowed their heads as if they were in pain. One of them raised his head to look at the sky and cried out in surprise. Everyone raised their heads to look at the top of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, as directed by the horrified shadow guards. It spanned an unknown number of kilometers and an unknown height. Suddenly, a veil of colorful light erupted at the top of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and descended quickly. A closer examination revealed that the light was the combat aura from a slew of powerful magical beasts. At the very least, they were bronze tier, and among them, there was no lack of powerful silver and gold tier magical beasts too. The vibrations triggered an avalanche while the magical beasts were running. The snow lines that covered the sky collapsed, and the avalanche's speed could only catch up to those bronze tier magical beasts. The majority of the magical beasts had fled before the avalanche happened. The magical beast's leader was a massive silver-white wolf with 12 wings on its back. It was several dozen meters long. Its eyes were blood red, and it wore a crescent-shaped insignia on its brow. Something had wounded its right ear. It had an odd gap. Why are there so many magical beasts on Dragonspine Snow Mountain? Watson was astounded to see the mystical beasts descending from the mountain's peak. He used the technique to identify the magical beasts' data. There were around 1 million of them, and they were generally stronger than the magical beasts in the Misty Forest. He thought he had practically fused all of the magical beasts in the Misty Forest the previous week. He had not anticipated seeing so many of them on Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Even silver-tier magical beasts with wings would struggle to soar to the Dragonspine Snow Mountain's height. Flying would be impossible due to the intense cold and thin air. Did those magical beasts climb up the mountain? Watson promptly dismissed that notion, knowing full well that it was much more improbable. After sweeping through the horde of magical beasts, his eyes were drawn toward the silver-white wolf at the fore of all the other magical beasts. Platinum-tier magical beast. The 12-winged moon-eating sky wolf. The sky wolf was a magical beast in ancient legends. It liked to devour the moonlight. The sky wolf dwelt in a dark and foreboding realm. It was an existence that could fight against the dragon race. Due to its characteristics, very few of them were exterminated by ancient elites. Most of the magical beasts that possessed the sky wolf's bloodline were silver-tier silver moon magical wolves. Ability: immune to light elemental damages, high-tier physical immunity, high-tier devour, able to convert what it devours into energy, night protection, have twice the strength during the night, high-tier berserk. When life is in danger, it will enter a frenzied state and sacrifice its rationality in exchange for an increment in combat strength. Additional ability: moon reading. Anyone who looks into its eyes will be pulled into an illusion, where they can be tortured and killed in the illusion. Additional skills: Platinum tier fusion spell Absolute Zero, Platinum tier ice elemental spell Eternal Ice Sealed Throne, Gold tier ice elemental spell Ice Giant Creation, Gold tier light elemental spell extreme cold Milky Way. Impressive attributes. Watson sighed. Such attributes were no worse than the golden flash. He was about to say something when he heard a creaking sound. He turned around to see Nightingale clenching her fists so tightly that he could hear it. Her eyes were bloodshot as she peered at the moon-eating skywolf as it descended from the mountain's summit. That split ear, it's the same one. I'm not wrong. The Nightingale utilized a teleportation technique only available to gold-tier warriors. She vanished into the distance as she ran toward the Dragonspine snow mountain. Miss Nightingale, it's too dangerous. The moon-eating sky wolf was a platinum-tier magical beast. Then, there were the other high-tier magical beasts as well. If Nightingale rushed forward by herself, would she not head toward her death? Watson was anxious. He could not care about anything else. He followed Nightingale and used teleportation to catch up to her. Behind him, Antonio and Sylvan flew toward the top of the mountain as well. They did not appear to be in good shape. Sylvan, I think someone is raising those magical beasts. Do you know where they came from? Antonio's eyes flashed between gold and silver. He cast the gold tier spell, Eye of Insight, and scanned the magical beasts that had descended upon them. He realized that those magical beasts were not wild beasts. He could see their claws and teeth were artificially polished. Their necks, limbs, and even their ears had rope burns. Only Sylvan had the ability to raise so many magical beasts on the border. Furthermore, Sylvan harbored hatred against the king, so he had the motive for raising those magical beasts. Master, do you suspect me? I don't know who raised those magical beasts either. I didn't even know that there were so many powerful magical beasts hidden in the misty forest. If those beasts had attacked us the previous year, we would have been reduced to ruins. Sylvan smiled bitterly. It was inevitable that he would be suspected. It was unreasonable that he did not know someone had nurtured so many magical beasts under his nose. However, he also did not expect that someone would do exactly that at the peak of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. That mountain separated the Holy Dragon Kingdom and the Winter Nation. It was even unlawful for one to climb it. Who would raise magical beasts there? Sylvan thought to himself. There was only one person who had such strength and was not afraid of the kingdom's laws. It is the 25th day of the 12th month of the year 221 according to the Holy Dragon calendar. A total of 108,100 researches had been done on the infinite fission spell. The purpose of the experiment was to test if we could control the infinite fission spell. However, all those tests had failed. We are unable to stop the spell once it is cast. We've used silver-tier magical beasts in the experiments, namely the gold-devouring rats. They became irrational and uncontrollable once inoculated with the spell. Every time it gorged itself, it would reproduce and promote the evolution of the gold-devouring rat, which then had the strength of a platinum-tier magical beast. I named it the Heaven-Devouring Rat Emperor. As a byproduct of the infinite fission spell, I have obtained a gold-tier medicine called the Magical Beast Evolution Fluid. It is a black liquid that will automatically liquefy into mist when the temperature is below zero. It is corrosive too. That medicine is extracted from the dead gold-devouring rat's bodily fluids. It can allow magical beasts to evolve quickly and unlock intelligence that is no weaker than that of a human. However, magical beasts that had taken that medicine will become aggressive and will probably end up dead. We've used about 2.2 million magical beasts in our experiments, and only about 1.3 million had survived the process. The estimated survival rate is 59%. To ensure the secrecy of the experiment, I used the gold-devouring rats to empty most of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and threw that mysterious medicine in there. If the mountain is destroyed, then the drugs will spread, and no one at the border will be spared. A middle-aged man with purple hair and a gray-white robe sat cross-legged on the snow on the mountain peak. He held a book with dense experimental data in his hand, and a quill pen was moving on its own to record what he had said. The words composed with the quill pen were vividly red, which was unusual. Every time it finished a paragraph, the man would stick the quill pen into his arm and let it suck his blood. I swear by this platinum-tier item, the pen of truth, that what I had stated is true, he whispered to himself. There are no lies, omissions, or concealments. Stop recording. Hiss. As soon as he finished speaking, the man sucked in a breath of cold air. The quill was like a knife. It spun and stabbed a piece of flesh off his arm before it continued to drill into it. The man's arm had other similar wounds. One could vaguely see his bones from the wounds, and he covered his bleeding right hand. As he endured the pain, he continued to whisper additional notes. That experiment and the spreading plague experiment conducted in the Broken Barons territory in the Winter Kingdom had proven to be ineffective. Both had failed to resurrect anyone. End of statement. After he finished speaking, the quill no longer moved, it landed on the ground quietly. The man picked up the quill and struggled to his feet before he closed the book with a click. The 2 experiments that lasted for 10 years have finally ended. It's time to report to His Majesty. I wonder if he has any new experiments for me, and where will I conduct them? I hope he can arrange for a more comfortable place for the experiments. My bones can't stand the cold on another snowy mountain. On the peak of the mountain, a gust of cold wind blew past, blowing his long robe, revealing a strange body underneath him. Half of it was white bones, and the other half was full of flesh and blood. The boundaries between them were clear and shocking. A rush of chilly wind blew past him on the mountain's crest. It blew on his long robe to reveal a strange form beneath the cloth. Half of it was bones, while the other half were flesh and blood. The distinctions between them were stark and shocking. Chapter 200. Advancing to the Platinum Tier. Nightingale glared at the moon-eating skywolf as they rushed down from the top of the mountain. She tried her best to teleport to the snowy mountain, and her strength sent the snowflakes on the ground flying. Pieces of memories invaded her mind. It had been 10 years. She would never forget that year's winter, a silver moon wolf had killed her parents. Her parents' bloodied bodies, as well as the sounds she heard before they died, were still fresh in her mind. She would never forget the magical beast that had killed her parents. The mockery in her eyes was filled with cruelty. It can't be wrong. That moon-eating skywolf is the magical beast from back then. Nightingale gritted her teeth. Despite the fact that nearly 10 years had passed and the magical beast in front of her was a moon-eating skywolf rather than a silver moonwolf, she was certain that it was the same one that had killed her parents back then. She remembered the notch-shaped mark on the ear of that moon-eating skywolf, and she remembered very clearly the broken chain locked on the silver moonwolf's right ear. That silver moon magical wolf appeared to have been trained by someone and had escaped on its own. She had wanted to take revenge on that magical beast for so many years, and she finally had the opportunity. Hatred blinded Nightingale's eyes, and her right hand touched the dagger at her waist. The distance got closer. 3,000 meters, 1,000 meters, 500 meters. When she was about 500 meters away, Nightingale's figure suddenly disappeared from where she was. She had turned into an illusory shadow and flashed forward 5 times in a row. It drew a lightning-shaped curve. Gold tier dark elemental fighting skill, lightning shadow chain stab. That was her best fighting skill. The moment she released it, the ground was plowed into a deep ravine. Snowflakes danced in the air, and ordinary snowflakes were whisked by her fighting spirit, which contained the aura of a sharp arrow. She appeared in front of the moon-eating sky wolf almost instantaneously. Nightingale was as small as an ant compared to the moon-eating sky wolf, which was more than 100 meters long and more than 10 meters high. She did not, however, lose her will to battle. When her knife met with the magical beast's fur, sparkles flew, and a few snow-white hairs were shed. That was all there was to it. A few holes also emerged on her dagger. The sword only managed to cut some of its furs. Nightingale did not expect the moon-eating sky wolf's body to be so tough, so she stepped back subconsciously. Roar! The moon-eating sky wolf stopped moving forward and lowered its massive head in confusion. Nightingale's appearance was reflected in its bright red eyes. It stared at her for a long time, and then the confusion in its eyes faded. It opened its mouth and pulled it into a strange arc as if it was smiling. It was not only Nightingale who had recognized the wolf. It seemed like the wolf had recognized the girl in front of it too. It raised its right claw slowly and then a sharp nail before it slid toward the ground in front of Nightingale. Nightingale's face grew pale when confronted with the attack. She felt as if her power had stopped working, and her body became extremely stiff. Fear lingered in her heart, just like 10 years ago when she saw her parents die tragically, but she could do nothing. At that time, she was only a little girl, and she could not face such a powerful demonic beast like a silver moon wolf. However, things had changed. She was already a gold tier warrior, and she still could not defeat it. Even if she used her hatred to suppress her fear, she could not stop her body from shivering in front of a higher-tier life form. She had miscalculated the moon-eating sky wolf's power, and it was too late for her to realize it. "I'm sorry, Mom and Dad, I could not avenge you. It seems like I will see you guys soon." Nightingale threw the dagger in her hand as if someone had ordered her to do that. She had trained hard for the past 10 years, and she had learned from the border count. However, all of those were meaningless then. She closed her eyes in despair. With a muffled bang, she was sent more than 10 meters backward. She spat out a mouthful of blood and felt dizzy. She felt as if her body was no longer hers. Then, more than 10 meters of snow mist rose from the ground as stones flew everywhere. That beast had the power to destroy the world with just a flick of its nails. The power of a platinum-tier magical beast was truly terrifying. After it sent Nightingale flying backward, the moon-eating skywolf did not seem to be satisfied. Its 12 wings created a layer of air current, which continued to sweep Nightingale higher. The curve of its mouth became wider as if it wanted to watch Nightingale fall from the sky and smashed into pieces. At that moment, a shadow appeared in the sky. Watson spread the light elemental combat aura wings on his back and appeared beside Nightingale. With a wave of his hand, he shattered the storm that the moon-eating skywolf had created. Watson scowled as he held Nightingale in his arms and gazed down at the moon-eating skywolf. He did not know why Nightingale hated that magical beast, which led her to charge at it regardless of the difference in their strengths. He only knew that that magical beast had injured his friend, and it had smiled like a human. It looked cunning, which made him dislike it very much. The moon-eating sky wolf raised its head and looked at Watson. It sensed a threatening aura from Watson, so it was extra vigilant. It had only felt the same aura from a human once before. The image of a human that was half bone and half flesh and blood invaded its mind, and it trembled. The moon-eating sky wolf was an existence that was comparable to a dragon. However, when compared to that particular great existence, it was merely an ordinary silver moon wolf with the sky wolf bloodline. The moon-eating sky wolf was born in the misty forest more than 10 years ago, and it had been an ignorant member of the forest. One day, a demon with purple hair and a body that was only half flesh and blood had captured it. He had brought it to the top of the Dragonspine snow mountain. The moon-eating sky wolf was not the only captured magical beast there. The demon bound them with some magic tools that weakened their strength so that he could run inhuman experiments on them every day. Sometimes, the purple-haired demon would feed them some strange black liquid. Occasionally, he would remove some of their organs and replace them with parts from other magical beasts. He would also pit them against each other. Then, he would feel their corpses to some black rats. Almost half of the magical beasts did not survive the experiment or died because of the low temperature on the Dragonspine snow mountain. The moon-eating sky wolf had survived by chance. There was bound to be a reward after a tragic price, and the prize was that it had become smarter. It had obtained a magical ability, advanced devouring. As long as it devoured, it would become stronger. The moon-eating sky wolf could eat trees, rocks, and even other magical beasts, and it would continue to evolve. Of course, the most delicious and nutritious ones were humans. A few years after it was experimented on, the purple-haired demon went out for a trip during the winter. The moon-eating sky wolf had used its advanced devouring ability to bite off the chains and followed the other magical beasts to the outside world. The moon-eating sky wolf had found a village and killed most of the people there. That was the most delicious meal it had ever had in its life. Unfortunately, a man with purple hair, who was different from the purple-haired demon, had saved the little girl. Then, it was captured again and returned to the mountain. Since it had learned how to devour, it had become a completely different existence from the other magical beasts. Over the years on the Dragonspine snow mountain, the moon-eating sky wolf had continued to devour and evolve until it became a platinum-tier magical beast. Finally, it was released from that cage, and while it was escaping, it had run into the little girl who had escaped its clutches 10 years ago. It was another joyous occasion for the moon-eating sky wolf, a reward from heaven for its escape from its predicament. It was a reward, so the moon-eating sky wolf had to prepare before it would start to eat. However, the child who looked to be a little more than 10 years old had interrupted its appetite. The moon-eating sky wolf considered such a child as a human larva. The boy was a protected child, so he must be more delicious than an adult. It could swallow 100 of such children in one bite. Even though the child had a dangerous aura, the moon-eating skywolf had swallowed at least a few thousand magical beasts over the years. It had won many battles, so it was quite confident. Furthermore, the more dangerous the aura, the stronger the person was. It would be an excellent tonic for the wolf. Gulp. The moon-eating sky wolf stretched its long tongue and licked its wet lips. It could no longer hold its restless appetite. It immediately spread its wings and flew into the sky. At the same time, the moon-eating sky wolf opened its mouth and released the advanced devouring ability. It aimed at Watson. It wanted to consume Watson first and then enjoy Nightingale's despair and fear, just like how it had swallowed Nightingale's parents in front of her many years ago. That would be very interesting. A human's fear and despair was the most delicious food for the moon-eating sky wolf. The moon-eating sky wolf narrowed its eyes and revealed a sadistic expression similar to that of a human. Its mouth emitted an irresistible smile as it pulled Watson closer to Nightingale. Watson had no reactions during that time and was about to be swallowed. At that moment, Watson looked at the moon-eating sky wolf's wide-open mouth and stretched out his free hand to fan the front of his nose. It stinks. It seems like you don't brush your teeth after meals. Furthermore, your roar is too loud. As a platinum-tier magical beast, you have no class and a bad temper. I had wanted to fuse you and bring you back to Black Moon Castle to expand my strength. Unfortunately, you don't meet my aesthetic standards. So, you should die here. Die there? The moon-eating sky wolf laughed mockingly. How could the child kill it? The child was the one who should die, he was food. Suddenly, it heard the child mutter something under his breath. Great sin beast, gluttony transformation. Immediately after that, a thick black fog appeared on the young man's body. It wrapped around him and expanded rapidly before he turned into a strange magical beast that was more than 100 meters tall. The magical beast was in the shape of a black goat. The fur on its body was condensed from the black mist, and it had no facial features on its face. One could only see its large jaws squirmed around its body at will. One could also hear the whispers of hunger and see its bright red intestines from its mouth. That magical beast faced the moon-eating sky wolf, and it opened its mouth almost at the same time. The moon-eating sky wolf claimed it could swallow the moon because of its wide mouth, and that was almost incomparable to the magical beast that Watson had transformed into. Watson's transformed beast's mouth overlapped with the moon-eating sky wolf's mouth that was dozens of meters wide. It was at least 10 times bigger than the moon-eating sky wolf's head. It could even hold 1/3 of the wolf's body. Crack! The giant maw bit off 1/3 of the moon-eating sky wolf's body, including its head, with a muffled sound. Only a smooth and bloody wreckage remained, which slid back to the ground lifelessly. The black goat was a magical beast that had devoured the moon-eating sky wolf. The wolf made a frightening gnawing noise as its size fluctuated between big and small until it stopped. The dark fog dispersed, and Watson, who was cradling Nightingale in his arms, reappeared. He sighed and complained, "Such a horrible taste. Also, aren't you overestimating yourself? You have clearly mastered several powerful platinum-tier spells, yet you're trying to kill me with the devouring skill. In terms of devouring platinum-tier beasts, is there anything else that can compare to gluttony?" Watson's expression was calm, but his tone was authoritative. Furthermore, his body emitted an aura that surpassed his ability, a sign that showed his advancement to the platinum tier. He had been at the gold tier for a long time. Gluttony's ability was to devour everything and turn it into its own power. Since he had absorbed the moon-eating sky wolf's power, Watson's body and combat aura were greatly strengthened. He had already touched the threshold of the platinum tier. He was only a step away from advancing to the platinum tier. Chapter 201. The strictly enforced words and the law of domain. Nightingale appeared to be dreaming. In her dream, she successfully avenged her parents by beheading the moon-eating sky wolf. Ah! Nightingale gently opened her eyes with a moan. Her entire body was in agony. She found herself in Watson's arms. The moon-eating sky wolf had only 2/3 of its body left, and its bright red blood was sprayed all over the sky. It was not a dream. Nightingale blinked, held her breath, and reflected on what had just occurred. She had failed to ambush the moon-eating sky wolf. Instead, the wolf had flicked her away with its nail before sweeping her up into the air. Watson was the one who had saved her. Did Watson kill the moon-eating skywolf? Then, she heard Watson's worried voice. "Miss Nightingale, are you okay?" "I'm fine, thank you." Nightingale looked at the dead moon-eating skywolf again. She felt warm as she laid in Watson's small arms. She looked a little disappointed. Her shock at the killing of the moon-eating skywolf was palpable. She was not happy. If she killed the moon-eating skywolf, her parents would not come back to life. Furthermore, Watson was the one who killed the wolf, so she did not get her revenge. The body of the moon-eating skywolf, whose head and 1/3 of its body had been eaten off, plummeted onto the Dragonspine snow mountain, causing the snowflakes to fall. The other magical beasts came to a halt, and they looked afraid. "Your leader is dead. It's your turn now." Watson descended from the sky with Nightingale in his arms. He placed her on the ground, took a step forward, and activated his second great sin beast. He had transformed into Beelzebub, the beast of gluttony, as black mist surrounded his body. Countless mouths drooled and moved in all directions over his massive body, which was in the shape of a black goat. The mouths made continuous grunts of hunger. Gulp, gulp, gulp. All the magical beasts that heard the sound were terrified, and they fled. The moon-eating sky wolf had been gobbled whole, and that harrowing scene had cast a shadow over their hearts. Watson, however, did not frighten all of the magical beasts. A swarm of gold-tier magical beasts roared and charged at Watson. They were the Icefield wolves, the storm eagles, the firmament divine eagles, and a deformed earth dragon with 3 heads and 6 wings. Those magical beasts were held back from reaching Watson by a massive claw that plummeted from the sky. The moon-eating sky wolf, whose head and half of its body had been swallowed by the claw, stood up shakily. A cold light flashed on its nail, and the other gold-tier magical beasts instantly turned into ice sculptures. They shattered rapidly. The silver-white ice melted into the moon-eating sky wolf's broken body and enabled it to recover the missing parts of its body. The moon-eating sky wolf's body was returned to its previous state in a matter of seconds. It even sprouted a new head. It shook its blood-soaked fur and howled at the sky. Roar! The magical beasts that had stopped charging at Watson due to his intimidation were motivated to attack him again. The millions of magical beasts' steps shook the entire mountain range. "That moon-eating sky wolf is not dead?" Watson looked surprised. The fact that it was still alive after its head was bitten off had startled him. He subconsciously examined the moon-eating sky wolf's data and discovered that it had a new skill called the super healing. As a result, its body's regeneration rate was significantly increased. Even if its head were severed, it would not die as long as its energy was replenished quickly. The system did not detect that ability just now. Did it evolve after it died? That conclusion piqued Watson's curiosity, even though he had intended to kill the moon-eating sky wolf immediately. The most pressing need at that time, however, was to kill the magical beasts led by that wolf. System, fuse them. Fusion activated. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing 500,000 magical beasts. You have obtained a platinum-tier body of a fused magical beast. Each of the magical beasts ran toward the beast of gluttony that Watson had transformed into. It was as if an invisible wall blocked them. Their bodies exploded and turned into streams of light that intertwined together. Not a single magical beast could charge past Watson. They died faster as they stormed forward. The light that had intertwined gave birth to a strange-looking magical beast. That magical beast was more than 1,000 meters long. It looked like a limp centipede that had laid on the ground. Its 2 sides were covered with heads, some of which were bird heads, some of which were heads of larger beasts. However, instead of facial features, those heads had wings and claws. It also had eyeballs, noses, and mouths scattered on the back of its body. It had looked strange and disgusting. Watson saw a silver moon wolf attached to that magical beast. It had 2 bird claws for eyes and 2 naked eyeballs rolled in the center of the claws. It made everyone there physically uncomfortable. Since he had fused so many types of beasts, innumerable lineages had been merged. It made it difficult for that monster-like thing to evolve in a certain direction. Fortunately, it did not unite with the other magical beasts to create a more formidable monster. Devour ability, activate. As Watson's voice faded, the beast of gluttony opened his mouth and swooped in front of the monster like giant centipede. He began to devour the monster's head, and in less than a minute, he had utterly consumed the 1,000-meter-long monster. During that process, the beast of gluttony's body stretched as if it was expanding. A peak platinum tier aura descended from a height of more than 100 meters to more than 500 meters. At that moment, Watson had finally successfully advanced to the platinum tier. The great sin beast's form had grown as well. He had gone from an ordinary platinum tier magical beast to a peak platinum tier monster. The world trembled. The magical elements in the air had infused his body and melted his shell. His true form was finally revealed. His body, which had been taller than a 10-year-old child, was now a little taller. Watson's tender face had also matured, and there was a symbol that looked like an eyeball without pupils on his forehead. It was the symbol of the source of chaotic elemental magic. The source was initially located in his abdomen, but it had shifted to the middle of his brows. It had fused with his soul. At the same time, he had obtained a new ability, strictly enforced words. The strictly enforced words skill was the symbol of a platinum tier mage. It could control the magical elements in the world through one's speech. It could also create a similar magical attack without the use of any magic. Since he had obtained a new ability, he had to give it a try. Let there be light. Watson waved his finger, and the sun above his head immediately shone brightly. Rays of sunlight intertwined and turned into a rain of arrows that descended from the sky. With him as the starting point, the beams crisscrossed and spread toward the endless mountain peak. That attack immediately pierced any magical beast within 1,000 meters. Fresh blood flowed with the light arrows. That attack had killed more than 1,000 magical beasts. The light arrows also melted the Dragonspine snow mountain within a 1,000-meter radius. The snow that had never melted had turned into crystal-clear water columns that revealed the black rocks below. Watson was quite pleased with the strictly enforced words skill after he had tested it. After he had advanced to the platinum tier, he felt as if his brain had grown many times in size. His thoughts were cleared, and the magical elements in his soul had become much stronger. Even his chaotic elemental magic source's capacity had grown to the level of a diamond tier champion. Other than the strictly enforced words skill, I think my ability as a warrior has been enhanced too when I advanced to the platinum tier, Watson muttered to himself. A gold tier warrior would be able to teleport, and after one advanced to the platinum tier, that ability would evolve into something called the law of domain. The law of domain was similar to the strictly enforced words skill. The latter would use one's will to change the world, while the former would release a majestic combat aura to form a domain. With Watson's strength, he could release a domain within a 100-meter radius, and his strength would be significantly enhanced while he was in that domain, and his enemies would be suppressed there as well. The law of domain would be diverse as well, based on the combat aura released. Watson lightly stomped his foot, and the earth trembled like ripples inside the 100-meter radius. A layer of incandescent light emerged from his feet and spread in all directions, creating a gleaming mirror on the ground. The moment the domain was formed, data about the domain immediately appeared in Watson's mind. Light domain. The host's ability within the domain is greatly enhanced and can appear at any time within the domain. The enemy's strength is also significantly suppressed and dimmed. The host can control all the weapons of light within the domain to attack the enemy. Over 1,000 light weapons within the domain quickly zoomed up as a result of Watson's thought. Each of the weapons was comparable to a peak gold tier weapon. The whistling combat aura emitted a whistling sound as it coiled around him. Even the toughest metal would be shattered in the presence of such weapons. Furthermore, those weapons could be reforged after they were depleted. One might say they were infinite. In terms of range and power, the law of domain could not be compared to the strictly enforced words. The former was more durable and was better in close combat. He did not only get a light elemental combat aura. He had tried the light domain, and just as he was about to continue trying the other combat aura domains, Antonio and Sylvan arrived at his side. Watson, congratulations on advancing to the platinum tier. You're only 10 years old, and you're already a platinum tier elite. It is unprecedented in the kingdom's entire history. Even the current Sword Saint only achieved the platinum tier when he was 15 or 16 years old. You are my most outstanding disciple, indeed. Antonio stroked his beard, his kind face seemed relieved. He had just become Watson's master less than a month ago, and Watson had already achieved the platinum tier. Watson would undoubtedly achieve the diamond tier and get even higher accomplishments. He was deeply honored to have such a disciple. Sylvan stood beside Antonio. He looked surprised. Watson, have you just achieved the platinum tier? Does that mean you were only at the gold tier when you fought with me? He thought that Watson was already a platinum tier elite when he forced him into such a situation. He had not expected Watson to be only a gold tier elite when they fought. What a monster! Watson's strength must have increased by dozens of times after his advancement to the platinum tier. Under such circumstances, could he still defeat Watson? Was there anyone amongst the platinum tier elites who could be a match for Watson? Chapter 202. An avalanche on the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. You flatter me, Master. I'm still far behind you. Watson replied humbly as he stroked the pupil-less eye mark between his brows, which immediately disappeared. It did not seem to have changed much from before that. He was certain that Antonio, who had cast the time-stripping spell, could fight him for 300 rounds. Even though the final result was still likely to be Antonio's triumph, it was a lot better than previously, when he was utterly powerless in front of Antonio. His advancement to the platinum tier meant that he had become one of the strongest people in the world. He could protect his family from any bully and allow them to live a better life. He would have a bright future. Watson's heart swelled with pride. His future was in a galaxy of stars. He came, he saw, and he conquered, just as he had promised the Black Moon Knights. He lowered his head to face the moon-eating sky wolf and the rest of the magical beasts. He was under no obligation to defeat those beasts then. All he needed to do was to defeat them. Wind, listen to my call. Strip everything. The spell was cast as a result of Watson's words. Strong gusts of wind blew across the entire Dragonspine Snow Mountain. The snow water that the light had melted had been blown completely dry. The wind blew away a layer of the ground, and the air grew thin. There was no reason for him to chant or perform any spell. He simply opened his mouth to stir the world, and the power was equivalent to that of a normal platinum tier spell. Living creatures could only exist because they needed to breathe oxygen and absorb energy particles. The oxygen got incredibly thin as Watson used the powerful winds to clear the air. Tens of thousands of magical beasts tumbled to the earth around him. In anguish, they scratched the rocks with their claws and whined as they rolled their eyes. They were all suffocating, unable to move, and had no choice but to wait for death in despair. Watson was correct in his assessment that he merely needed to move his fingers to slay those magical beasts. He did not have to move his hands at all. He simply needed to say a single word or cast a glance to end the life of those magical beasts. Roar! The moon-eating sky wolf, who witnessed the action from somewhere nearby, was no longer smiling. Its expression tensed. It could not breathe either. It did not understand what had happened. The magical beasts were on their way to attack Watson, and when the young man's strength was almost exhausted, the wolf would swallow him. However, Watson had devoured the other magical beasts and became stronger because of that. It looked like the young man had the same ability as it did. He could grow stronger with his devour ability. The young man was even stronger than the wolf. How did he get that talent? The wolf felt envious, just like a human. Watson's danger level had changed from dangerous to deadly. The wolf thought that it would die if it were to stay there any longer. So, it immediately turned around and ran toward the Dragonspine Snow Mountain peak. It could win no matter the kind of conflict it faced. Even if it were to die, it could still resurrect itself. That was not its first failure, but it was the first time it felt terror. The wolf was willing to return and accept the purple-haired demon once more. Otherwise, it might die in Watson's hands. You want to run? Stay here with me. Watson's expression was calm. He stomped his feet and teleported above the moon-eating skywolf's head and activated the Law of Domain. At that time, he activated the Primal Chaos Domain. The Primal Chaos Combat Aura was the strongest one he had. The moment the domain was activated, it enveloped the skywolf. A greenish-gray air current appeared on the ground and surrounded Watson and the skywolf at the same time. A massive pupil-less eye appeared in the center of the green-gray air current. Distorted lines filled the eye. It was cold and emotionless, like a god's eyes that treated all lives and deaths equally. Chaos Domain. The host's abilities are greatly enhanced within the domain, and all enemy attacks will be suppressed. The host can use the pupil-less eye to release light rays within the domain. Anything that the light rays covered will be erased. The moon-eating sky wolf charged left and right within the chaos domain. Its body emitted a biting cold air as it released a platinum-tier spell, the Absolute Zero. It was an extremely powerful spell that could freeze space and time. However, before the freezing air could spread, it had already touched the chaotic airflow and shattered. The Absolute Zero spell had been nullified. The moon-eating sky wolf looked desperate. It waved its claws crazily and opened its mouth as it tried to shatter the airflow in its surroundings. However, when it came into contact with the chaotic airflow, the fur on its body was corroded until its bare skin. Then, the chaotic airflow destroyed its skin, leaving only a layer of flesh on its skeleton. It was removed layer by layer. Watson did not even use the pupil-less eye, the core of his domain, but the moon-eating sky wolf was about to die. There was no way to retreat, and no attacks could break the domain. The moon-eating sky wolf's expression became even more desperate. Antonio and Sylvan stood outside the domain and watched everything. No one moved since they knew it was pointless, especially Sylvan. He looked at Watson's chaotic domain with shock and disbelief. This is a new element that is different from all the other known elements. Was Watson the one who developed the new magical element at the boundary? Someone had developed a new magical element on the border not too long ago, and it had altered the world's composition. He had noticed it while he was in the mansion, and he even dispatched Nightingale to investigate the matter. In the end, he found nothing because he had put the incident on hold due to the impending winter. He had previously believed that a mysterious platinum-tier elite had created a new magical element. He had wanted to find that elite and recruit him. He had never imagined Watson to be that person. Watson, after all, had only been at the gold tier. However, it seemed like he could create a new magical element that did exist in the world. What kind of talent was that? When Sylvan turned around, he noticed that Antonio's eyes were calm, as if he had known about it for a long time, which made him uncomfortable. It seemed like Antonio's decision to take Watson as his disciple had something to do with that matter. It was no surprise that Antonio, who had not left the mountain in a long time, had been at the border. He felt conflicted when he realized that the person he had been looking for to produce the new magical elements was Watson. While he pondered that, the moon-eating sky wolf had almost been obliterated. It had been stripped down to its skeleton. Watson had stopped. It looked like he did not intend to kill the moon-eating sky wolf. He must have wanted to see if the moon-eating sky wolf could still be resurrected with such extensive wounds. Perhaps it would develop a new ability too. If the answer was yes, he could certainly injure the moon-eating sky wolf repeatedly and wait for it to develop various abilities before he devoured it. Even though he had reached the platinum tier, he was still unsatisfied. He still had the potential to grow stronger. Gotcha! Watson came to a halt when he heard a sharp sound. He was surprised to find that the rocks under the moon-eating sky wolf's feet, which had turned into white bones, had cracked apart. A dense black airflow rose from within and coiled around its white bones. Then, the airflow creaked. Numerous giant black rats that were more than a meter long crawled out of the ground. In just a short moment, thousands of those rats had appeared. They had a bronze-tier aura, and as soon as they came out, they darted onto the moon-eating sky wolf's bone. Then, they started to bite with their sharp teeth. Even though the moon-eating sky wolf was a platinum-tier magical beast, it could not withstand the rats' attacks. Furthermore, it only had its skeleton left, which made it even harder for it to hold on. The rats shattered the wolf's bones and devoured it. The black rats that had swallowed the wolf's bones flashed with light. Then, they split into two, and the total amount continued to increase. However, those rats were swiftly killed when they touched the airflow within the domain. Unfortunately, their bodies split, and the number doubled even quicker. Where did those rats come from? How are they so tough? Watson used the system to investigate when he sensed the difference between those rats and ordinary magical beasts. Bronze-tier synthetic magical beast. Goldbiter rat. Abilities. Rapid devouring. Their hard teeth can crush any hard metal, and they will devour everything in sight. Common consciousness. All Goldbiter rats share a single consciousness. Additional abilities. Natural selection. Will automatically destroy weaker rats and continue to evolve. Infinite fission. The energy converted by devouring will constantly replicate new rats. There is no upper limit. Additional abilities. Advanced fusion. Different Goldbiter rats can be fused, the level will increase, and they will gain new abilities. What is a synthetic magical beast? Watson's eyes narrowed. That was the first time he had heard of the existence of such a magical beast. The goldbiter rats did not have any special offensive abilities, but their devouring attributes were enough to cause trouble. He did not know what the person who created those rats had in mind. He did not have time to think. The thousands of goldbiter rats had changed after they devoured the moon-eating sky wolf. Silver wings sprouted from their backs, and their black fur was covered in ice armor. Their size had also increased. They had grown to be as tall as humans and began to move toward Watson. The ground beneath the feet of the surviving hundreds of thousands of magical beasts began to crack. The goldbiter rats crawled outward. They climbed onto the magical beasts and bit them until there was nothing left. Those magical beasts did not put up much of a fight, as though they were used to that. Perhaps the magical beast's presence at the mountain base was meant to feed the goldbiter rats. The entire Dragonspine Snow Mountain was teeming with rats as far as the eye could see. People who have a fear of density would most certainly faint if they had witnessed that scene. One could hear the cracking sounds as the goldbiter rats crawled out of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. The entire mountain range had existed for an unknown amount of years, but it had collapsed that day. It had sunk to 100 meters almost immediately. After that, one could see that the mountain was riddled with holes. Snowflakes and dust flew in every direction as the roar of an avalanche echoed all the way to the border. Chapter 203. The King's Conspiracy. I shall complete the mission His Majesty assigned to me. The purple-haired man, half flesh and half skeleton, stood calmly in the sky above the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. He watched as the mountain range beneath his feet cracked and gradually sank. He put his quill pen and books aside. The massive snow mountain had collapsed. There would be no winter at the border. Instead, it would be replaced by a never-ending swarm of goldbiter rats. It was unclear who posed the greater threat. On the one hand, using the goldbiter rats from the experiment to spend 10 years hollowing out the Dragonspine Snow Mountain can remove the natural moat that spans between the northern and southern kingdoms. On the other hand, it can exploit the goldbiter rats to control the border. Aside from that, it is also an army of formidable magical beasts. I am curious how many people it can kill in one shot. His Majesty is truly a mastermind. The purple-haired man sighed. He extended his left hand, which resembled a white bone. A small black rat squeaked as it ran out of his body and onto his palm. That black rat was no bigger than a palm. Its body was covered with silky black fur. It had a similar appearance to the goldbiter rats, but there were noticeable distinctions. First and foremost, the rat had a platinum crown mark between his brows. Its eyes were also platinum-colored and looked wise. Most significantly, the rat's physique exuded a majestic air that belied its diminutive stature. Even heaven and earth appeared insignificant in comparison. The only product that has evolved to the top in that experiment is the platinum-tier heaven-devouring rat king. Its presence allows it to exert control over the other goldbiter rats. It permits them to travel around the border without causing too much damage, and it also prevents them from spreading to the other regions. The purple-haired man turned his gaze to the endless north. The beauty in the north was progressively unveiled as a result of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain's collapse. It was a broad, never-ending white plateau. The terrain had begun to rise gradually. Every river was frozen beneath, and glaciers stood everywhere on the earth. That was a completely distinct place from the Holy Dragon Kingdom. All year long, it was bitterly cold. The Northern Winter Nation was based there. King Landhar III, the ruler of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, was wise and brilliant. He was dissatisfied with the kingdom's territory. He wanted to expand, and the Holy Dragon Kingdom was located in the center of the continent. The other 4 kingdoms had long coveted that fertile land. Rather than waiting for the other kingdoms to attack, it was better to strike them first. Destroying the Dragonspine Snow Mountain was only the beginning. The chilly air swept across his face, blowing the purple-haired man's long robe. The Dragonspine Snow Mountain barrier had vanished. The frigid air from the north blasted across the border. It made the winter even colder. Sparse snowflakes fell from the sky and gradually grew heavier. The man stared silently at the thick snow that covered the entire border. He turned around and took a stride toward the heart of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Just as he was ready to depart, a young voice echoed from behind him. "Stop right there. When the purple-haired man turned around, he noticed a young man with brown hair and blue eyes flying through the air. He was looking at him with a scowl on his face. "Who are you?" The purple-haired man tilted his head slightly. He looked confused. The young man in front of him was clearly from the border, yet he had never heard of such a person. He appeared to be around 10 years old, but his body radiated the aura of a platinum-tier mag. It was somewhat surprising. "My name is Watson. I'm from Black Moon Castle." "Watson? Black Moon Castle?" The purple-haired man became even more confused. He had never heard of those names. It seemed that he had stayed on Dragonspine Snow Mountain for too long, so he knew nothing about the outside world. Both of them sized each other up. The older man's dark purple hair was oily, and Watson wondered how long he had not washed it, and his mage robe was frayed. The wind blew softly, and it exposed the man's left calf. The man's face was rather attractive despite the fact that Watson could see his bones. The corners of his eyes were painted with clown-like makeup, and it gave him a dismal and sinister appearance. He was sure that the man was the one who had caused the collapse of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. He had previously used the gluttony beast to consume the moon-eating skywolf and advanced to the platinum tier. He had hoped to wait for the moon-eating skywolf to evolve a few more generations before he would devour it. However, a swarm of rats had rushed out and devoured the moon-eating skywolf instead. It made him feel quite uneasy. At that moment, a strange fluctuation had stretched from the sky above the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. He immediately used teleportation and rushed over there. He saw a purple-haired middle-aged man opposite him. "I've already told you my name. Now it's your turn." The middle-aged man shook his head in response to Watson's question. "There is no need to inquire. You will not let me go no matter who I am, right? Similarly, now that you have seen me, I can't let you go either." He could empathize with Watson's feelings. Everyone at the border would be upset if they saw the goldbiter rats running around the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and imagined the troubles they would have in the future. However, what he did not expect was that Watson would growl at him. "Of course, I won't let you go. There's a 10,000-year-old ancient ruin buried beneath the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. I was just waiting to excavate it and learn some ancient spells. There are also those magical beasts, including the moon-eating skywolf. They belong to Black Moon Castle. But you just released a bunch of rats to eat them. Do you know how much I've lost? At least 100 million gold coins." Watson's heart was bleeding. Aside from the ancient ruins, the remaining hundreds of thousands of magical monsters were real and worth at least 10 million gold coins. The purple-haired man opened his mouth slightly. Obviously, he did not expect Watson to say such things. He thought Watson was worried about the border. He did not expect the other party was only concerned with a mere ruin and hundreds of thousands of magical beasts. He really did not know how that young man's brain worked. The purple-haired man shook his head, collected his wits, and pointed at Watson. The heaven-devouring Rat King, who stood on his palm, immediately turned into a stream of light and fled. The heaven-devouring Rat King was fused from evolved goldbiter rats. The Rat King had the advantage of almost all the magical beasts because it had devoured a significant number of them. It was the strongest magical beast at the same level as a platinum-tier elite. It had a unique skill, heaven-devouring. It could devour combat auras and even the radiance of the sun, moon, and stars. Watson would leave no remains if he were killed by that particular method. It was the most basic and convenient way to do that. "What is that flying past us?" Watson did not even look up at the heaven-devouring Rat King swooping overhead. He stomped his feet, and a 100-meter-long chaotic realm appeared beneath him. The turbulent airflow produced a massive eye without pupils, which was focused at the flying heaven-devouring Rat King. He activated his domain ability, Eliminate Light Rays. The distorted light rays within the pupil-less eye intertwined and turned into a massive cyan-gray light pillar. It swept past the heaven-devouring Rat King, leaving barely a few dregs behind. After that, Watson summoned his domain and flew right to the purple-haired man's side. He struck him furiously with his palms. The green wind in the air gathered spontaneously and transformed into two green 100-meter-long palms. He held the purple-haired man in his palms. "Remove all valuable items from your body. If you can satisfy me, I may not hold you accountable for the crime you just committed. You will not be able to go today if you don't do that. You dispatched the heaven-devouring Rat King in a single blow, and you have also mastered the law of domain and the strictly enforced word skills. You are a platinum-tier dual-class mage. Who are you?" The purple-haired man looked shocked for the first time as he was held in Watson's storm-like palm. His long, narrow eyes were wide open. It was one thing for him to be a platinum-tier mage at such a young age, but he was also a dual-class mage. It was a heaven-defying talent. He could not believe he had never heard of such a gifted mind. "I've already told you that I'm Watson from Black Moon Castle." Watson's lips curled. "Don't try to change the topic. I'll give you another chance. You can stay and atone for your sins if you pay me enough compensation for the ruins you destroyed and the magical beasts you slaughtered." "What if I choose neither?" The man's long robe had been pierced. Bones emerged swiftly from the interior. They twisted and changed into larger bones. The bones on the man's body multiplied by tens of thousands in less than 10 seconds. He transformed into a skeleton that was hundreds of meters tall and floated into the sky, with 6 skeletal arms splayed out behind him. Each arm housed a unique treasure. There was a gleaming set of platinum-tier sword and shield that emitted an ancient aura. The 6 weapons looked extraordinary, and the man's body was embedded in the skeleton's chest. He controlled the skeleton to aim the 6 weapons at Watson. At the same time, the heaven-devouring Rat King, who Watson had just destroyed, began to squirm and expand. First, it turned into a piece of meat, and then the meat turned into a brand new heaven-devouring Rat King. Then 12 heaven-devouring Rat Kings surrounded Watson. The domain's size continued to expand, and soon it became a radius of 100 meters. The heaven-devouring Rat King, which had grown in size, had a platinum crown shape on its forehead. It had turned from illusory to real. Its mouth also opened into black holes that absorbed its surrounding light. Space seemed to be distorted as it enveloped Watson. He looked around him, but he could only see empty darkness. If I include the heaven-devouring Rat King, that is more than 10 platinum-tier elites. Even if we ignore the heaven-devouring Rat King's splitting ability, there are still 2 of us, and we're both platinum-tier elites. You are just one person. How do you intend to beat us?" The purple-haired man inquired. A peak platinum-tier mage stood in front of him with the heaven-devouring Rat King beside him. The Rat King was also at platinum tier, so it meant that it was tough to kill. It would also split its body continuously. That could be the most severe crisis that Watson had ever faced. Chapter 204. The Demon's Blood. Watson did not answer the question. Instead, he began to chant. The spell he was chanting was composed of runes. As the beautiful language fell, a long river of time appeared in the sky. It was the river of history projection, which had fused with a peak platinum tier spell. The river of history projection was considerably stronger because Watson was a platinum tier mage, and he was also chanting in runes. Watson had called 100 of his past selves. Even his most insignificant counterpart was at the gold tier. The world tree branches wriggled out of Watson's palm almost immediately. He used the Starfall spell to manufacture golden cards swiftly. Then, he utilized the God's Descent spell to meld them into each of his past self's bodies. He twisted the wish for the world ring on his finger and made a wish to regain his strength for all the cards he created. However, he would need to use 10 years of his master's life. He made several wishes until he cast the God's Descent spell on all the clones. When the clones merged with the God's Descent spell, they had an aura different from other humans. Some had black crowns on their heads and wore black robes. Some were hung upside down on crosses, their bodies were charred, and their faces were twisted. There was also a Grim Reaper who held a huge scythe in his hand and wore a black cloak, but there was nothing inside the cloak. 100 magical beasts had descended. Even the heaven-devouring Rat King, who had consumed many magical beasts, let out 2 anxious roars when he sensed the aura of those magical beasts. The purple-haired guy was also there. He was a little taken aback. My clones are equivalent to 100 platinum tier elites. Even without their abilities, I can transform into more than 30 forms by myself. How are you going to defeat me? Watson repeated the purple-haired man's words back to him, word for word and full of mockery. The purple-haired man was speechless. Watson was able to summon 100 platinum tier clones. He could not do it. He was even more suspicious of Watson's identity. He must be the top elite in the kingdom. Why was he at the border? What was the relationship between that youth and the border count? As he thought about that, the black hole created by the heaven-devouring Rat King shattered. The light and space were no longer distorted, revealing the scenery outside. Sylvan and Antonio stood side by side, their faces grim. The goldbiter rats had just fled the Dragonspine snow mountain. They did not go after them. Instead, they tried to think of ways to prevent the Dragonspine snow mountain from a total collapse. They were unequivocal about what the destruction of the snow mountain would mean to them. Finally, they discovered that the mountain's interior had been plagued with holes for a long time. They would not be able to save it even if they worked together to cast an earth elemental spell. In addition to that, there was a lot of black gas inside the Dragonspine snow mountain. It expanded along the mountain, which had collapsed. To keep the gas from drifting toward the border, the two of them worked together to shift the mountain's collapse toward the north. The shock wave created by the destruction pushed the snow on the ground thousands of kilometers away. The snow had reached a height of more than 100 meters. The two of them did not have time to catch all the rats that had escaped from the mountain. They were afraid Watson would follow them when they saw the young man trapped in a pitch-black space. They broke into the same space and discovered that Watson and 100 magical beasts were in the space. The heaven-devouring Rat King and the man embedded in the huge skeleton were also there. Antonio's expression changed when he saw the purple-haired man. He had recognized the man in front of him. Antonio? The purple-haired man gave Antonio a sidelong glance. He was perplexed at first, but then he exhibited an even more doubtful expression. Weren't you an elderly man? How have you become so young? Did you use the time-stripping method? No, you do not have the time-stripping technique's aura on you. What is going on? Moriarty, you are my first disciple. Won't you address me as master when you see me? As for your doubts, I'm more puzzled about you. You should have died in the demoness riot 10 years ago. Antonio cast a puzzled glance at the purple-haired man, especially when he noticed the bony body on Moriarty's left side. As the kingdom's representative, Moriarty had gone on a crusade against the demoness church 10 years ago. Finally, everyone said that Queen Avril had killed him. Half of his body had been stripped of flesh and blood, and he had perished in agony. Antonio had examined his body and determined that his disciple could not have lived. Therefore he had buried him with his own hands. The demoness church was defined as exceedingly evil and detested by people due to the kingdom's deliberate propaganda. Why would a disciple, who was dead, stand in front of him? Many thoughts went through Antonio's mind in an instant. I will address you as master if you want me to do so. I did not expect you to be at the border as well, master, and not in the Temple of the Stars. It looked like you were here for a stroll. What an elegant mood to have, master. The purple-haired man named Moriarty revealed a somewhat lonely smile. Does that mean you and my junior brother, who is also the border count, are working together to obtain the supreme position, master? Don't talk nonsense. Antonio scolded him. I am here to recruit a disciple. Recruit a disciple? Moriarty's gaze turned toward Watson. Watson was the only one who met that profile. No wonder he could reach the platinum tier at such a young age. Furthermore, the spell he used seems a little familiar. It looks like he is your disciple, indeed, master. What a fantastic student. All right, that's enough gossip. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Moriarty took control of the massive skeleton body and grabbed the heaven-devouring Rat King. A gigantic hole opened behind him, emitting a tremendous attractive force that drew him to another location. Stop, you haven't told me how you're still alive. Antonio's face shifted, and a layer of aura appeared on his body. The time-stripping spell led him to transform into a diamond star and fly toward Moriarty. He chanted a platinum-tier dark elemental spell, the Black Hole, and summoned a massive black hole to fight against the heaven-devouring Rat King's black hole spell. And why did you destroy the Dragonspine Snow Mountain? Who are you working for? Tell me the truth. Sylvan was right on his tail. He also cast the time-stripping spell, and his strength immediately increased to the platinum tier level. Following that, he released the Vermilion Nova, the most extraordinary fire elemental spell, and a little sun descended. Moriarty appeared relaxed despite the fact that he was under attack by two persons comparable to diamond tier elites. Master, junior brother. Well, since we now have another junior brother, perhaps I need to call you first junior brother? Aren't you guys too enthusiastic for a farewell? Moriarty controlled the massive skeleton and raised its 6 arms, 2 of which held a shield and the other a longsword, to face Sylvan and Antonio's spells. The shield kept the red sun at bay, enabling the high-temperature flames to wash over it. The longsword slashed the black hole open. Moriarty did not attempt to block any of their attacks at the same time. Black liquid oozed from the bones on his left side. It wiggled and wrapped itself around the bones and turned it black. The darkened skin formed wings from the back, a tail from behind his buttocks, and ultimately covered his face. It made a mask with jagged fangs. A red texture was blended in with the black liquid. It flickered slightly, giving Moriarty the appearance of a demon that crawled out of hell. Moriarty's aura immediately rose from platinum to diamond tier once the red-black liquid slithered out. The massive skeleton he had inlaid had likewise turned red and black. Moriarty had truly entered the diamond tier, unlike Antonio. The latter exploited hundreds of his prior selves to stack together and attain the power of the diamond tier in his platinum tier world. I am sure you did not expect it, Master. You abandoned me and buried me back then, but I persevered. I should thank you, Master. I would not be as powerful as I am today if it were not for you. When I was researching the magical beasts and figuring out how to get them to evolve, I came up with a strategy that could allow humans to evolve. I called it the demon's blood. Speaking of which, I was inspired to create that solution by your time-stripping technique. However, it is more powerful and has fewer adverse effects than the time-stripping method. You are no longer my match. Half of Moriarty's face was covered with a red and black mask, and his voice became low, hoarse, and confident. For the sake of our past friendship, I won't kill you today. But you shouldn't fight so needlessly either. No one knew how hard his life had been all those years ago. The king had pulled him out of the grave. Even though he did not know how the king had saved him, he was grateful for what he had done. That was why he worked for the king. The prerequisite for his work was to live well. He did not hesitate to apply the magical beast evolution fluid that he had tried on the goldbiter rats on himself to survive. Fortunately, he was successful. He had evolved into a demonic form. All of his powers had multiplied dozens of times under that guise. He had also received demonic powers which could taint everything, including magic and combat aura. He would pollute anything he touched. The 2 magic spells that Antonio and Sylvan had cast had caused red patterns to form in the black hole. The attractive force drew closer to Antonio, and the flames of the vermilion nova turned turbid and burnt him. The demonic power had polluted the magical beasts that Watson had summoned before they ever came close. They were burnt into black and red ashes. No one in the world, not even the most knowledgeable and strong mage, could harm him. Moriarty exuded confidence. Half of his body had already passed through the teleportation black hole. At that moment, he noticed a black shadow flash in front of him. System fusion, activate. A feeling of weakness washed over him. The demon's blood that had spread on the massive skeleton had shrunk and turned into a fist-sized black and red ball that flew into the hands of the young man. It collided with the other blood in his hand and exploded with a bright light. The black and red blood immediately wrapped around the crimson blood and darkened it. That youth was Watson. That's impossible. Moriarty felt an incredible feeling of weakness as blood oozed from the corners of his mouth. Even Antonio and Sylvan's combined efforts could not break through the demonic power he used for defense. How could the young man in front of him quickly break in and grab more than half of his demon's blood? After Watson did that, the young man looked at the massive skeleton with interest. It gave Moriarty a bad feeling about that. Chapter 205. Watson's Demonic Servant. A Platinum Tier Special Item. The Demon's Blood. Effect. The essence and evolution fluid extracted from tens of thousands of magical beasts can allow the human body to evolve continuously. It can also enable the body to break through its limits and enter a stronger level. However, it does not have a 100% success rate. The consequence of failure is the host's death, devoured by the demon's blood. The current success rate of evolution is at 50%. Additional effects. Super self-healing. After fusing with the demon's blood, as long as there is still a tiny piece of tissue left in the body, it can be resurrected. Power of contamination. A demon-specific ability that can contaminate all magic and combat aura. Demon form. After transforming into a demon, all of your strength will significantly increase. You will be immune to the attacks of the evil attribute and will be restrained by the light elemental attacks. Additional skill. Boiling demon's blood. Usually, the demon's blood was stored in the bone marrow. When activated, the blood would multiply and cover other items. Any object covered in the demon's blood would gain basic intelligence, and the host could control it. It will also have the strength of a platinum-tier summoned beast. Watson touched the demon's blood in his hand as the complete data appeared in his eyes. This blood is a platinum-tier item. I can change my form once I consume it. Not bad at all. Even though the demonic form made him happy, he was surprised with the form's ability to self-heal. He had wanted the same ability from the moon-eating sky wolf. He would not need to be afraid of more powerful opponents. As long as his body and soul were not destroyed in a single hit, he could absorb more energy and resurrect his body. Watson did not devour the demonic blood directly because there was a chance of failure if he did that. The success rate for evolving pure demonic blood was less than only 10%. Watson has just fused his blood with the demonic blood, and the success rate increased to 50%. After dealing with Moriarty, he chose to continue to fuse his blood with the demonic blood. Alternatively, he might use the Wish for the World Ring to boost the success rate to 100%. After he made his decision, Watson began to examine the massive skeletons that protruded from Moriarty's torso. Those bones were not ordinary either. Platinum-tier special item. Purgatory skeleton. Effects. The skeleton fossil of the platinum-tier demonic beast, Hell Baron, was extracted from the depths of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. The Hell Baron was a species from ancient times. It had 6 arms, and each arm represented a punishment from Hell. Those who fused with the skeleton could obtain the Hell Baron's powers. Additional effects. The Hell Baron transformation, divided into complete transformation and partial transformation. A complete transformation allows one to transform into the Hell Baron, and a partial transformation can only summon the Hell Baron's skeleton. Superphysical resistance. Almost immune to all physical damages. Super magic resistance. Almost immune to all magical spells. Demon King. Suppressive effect on dark elemental creatures. Loss of pain. Due to its unique body structure, no physical or spiritual attacks can cause it pain. Additional skills. 6-arm torture. The weapons in those 6 arms are torture tools made for the toughest parts of one's bones. Anyone injured by those 6 torture tools will suffer physical and spiritual pain and die in extreme pain. No wonder Moriarty's body is half flesh and half bone. So it's because of that tool. When summoned locally, the Purgatory skeleton could replace the bones in its own body with those of the Hell Baron. The body's strength could develop then, but it could also escape the impacts from its surroundings. It is ideal for places with a freezing climate like the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. However, when he looked at Moriarty's figure, it was clear that he had not entirely merged with the Purgatory skeleton. Of course, all of that was not important to Watson. Since he knew the effects of the Purgatory skeleton, he did not plan to leave it to Moriarty. The older man had destroyed the ruins in the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and killed hundreds of thousands of magical beasts. If he did not get something from him as compensation, Watson would feel like he had lost a lot of blood. In short, he wanted that item. With that thought in mind, Watson twisted one of the 8 rings on his finger and made a wish. The white bone of an arm immediately appeared in his hand. It was a bone that he had used to duplicate himself. The price was 1 year of Antonio's lifespan. Watson held the bone and unleashed the system fusion onto the massive Purgatory skeleton Moriarty had implanted. System fusion, activate. DMN Brat, die. Moriarty sensed something was awry and instantly abandoned his plans to assault Antonio and Sylvan. He controlled the 6 gigantic arms of the skeleton on his back and allowed 6 different platinum-tier torture instruments to run over Watson's body. The platinum-tier longsword represented the dismemberment punishment. It would cut off a person's flesh bit by bit, causing them to die in grief. The shield represented the iron virgin punishment. When folded, the shield would act like a huge coffin that could trap a person in it. The rivets on it would pierce into that person's body. Other than that, there were 4 other types of punishment methods that were exceptionally brutal as well. Moriarty unleashed the punishments at that precise moment. Thousands of phantoms surged over Watson's body as the sword of death instantaneously turned toward him. The Iron Virgin's shield folded and encased him. Then, the casket was struck by the various layers of punishment methods. Antonio and Sylvan's expressions changed when they saw that scene. They wanted to step forward and help, but before they could do anything, the dignified statue formed by the Iron Maiden's shield suddenly shattered and revealed Watson's figure inside it. All the instruments of torture that touched him were like phantoms that did not exist, they passed through him. On the contrary, the purgatory skeleton on Moriarty had quickly disappeared. It turned into light and fused into the bone in Watson's hand. It had turned into an exquisite little skeleton. Its drooping head quietly floated in the air, like a highly skilled puppet. Moriarty's expression darkened when he saw that scene because Watson had looked relaxed even when he was attacked. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing the Purgatory skeleton, a Platinum tier item. The Purgatory skeleton and demon's blood have been detected and can be fused. Would you like to fuse them, Master? Fuse. Congratulations, Master, for successfully fusing the Purgatory skeleton. You have awakened a demon that had been in a deep sleep. You have obtained Hell Baron's complete body. After the system notification, the demonic blood around Watson collided with the bone. Then, the demonic blood boiled and covered the bone. Black and red flesh grew and outlined a graceful body. A perfect woman with somewhat ebony skin and beautiful curves materialized in front of Watson in less than a minute. The woman's looks were so flawless that she did not appear to be from that world. She had 2 crimson-curled horns on her head, 6 limbs spread out from behind her, and a slender demonic tail that extended from behind her. Her body was covered in enigmatic dark red markings that radiated wildness. The few Platinum tier elites there, including Moriarty, were taken aback. Watson's eyes were wide open as well. He had no idea that when 2 Platinum tier tools collided, they would be fused into a human rather than a stronger tool. The voluptuous and lovely demoness opened her eyes as if she sensed their gazes. Her eyes were pitch black with vertical slits in her pupils. One could see bright red veins around her eyes. It was as if space had diminished the instant she opened them. Moriarty's companion, the heaven-devouring Rat King, let out an agonized shriek. Ah, how many years has it been? 1,000 years? 10,000 years? Ever since Gabriel, that D*MN woman, cut off my neck, I have not felt the warm sunlight for a very long time. The demoness sighed as she reached out to brush her stunning red hair. Black hellfire erupted from her naked flesh to form a long black gown. The 6 arms on her back retracted into her body at the same time. What kind of monster is that? Could it be? Sylvan could not help but mutter. In his memory, there was only one creature that looked like that. The voice was not loud, yet it reached the demoness' ears. She turned her head and smiled. How rude. I am not a demon. I am Lilith, the Hell Baron group's leader. You may refer to me as Queen Lilith, Demoness of the Night, or Lilith, and I am not a monster. Do you understand, you pitiful human? As soon as she finished speaking, the woman who called herself Lilith extended a finger toward Sylvan. A red ray of light followed her finger and flew toward him. That was the demon's unique power of pollution. Sylvan hurriedly summoned a protective shield as if he had not expected her to attack him so suddenly. Regrettably, it was too late. The red light breached the shield and settled on his chest. It melted his garments and splattered putrid flesh and blood on his chest. It made it difficult for him to breathe, and his face was pale. You worthless humans will become my sacrifices to celebrate the great Lilith's resurrection. But, first and foremost, Lilith walked with a brilliant smile after she injured Sylvan, the kingdom's greatest mage, with a single blow. She walked toward Watson before she changed her attitude and knelt on one knee. She said, I am Lilith, Great Master, and I would like to express my appreciation to you and swear my loyalty to you for resurrecting me. I shall grant all of your requests. Please issue your orders. Chapter 206. Watson is not a monster. What's going on? The Purgatory skeleton has turned into a living Hell Baron? Moriarty was unconcerned that he had been deprived of the Purgatory skeleton and had succumbed to frailty. Instead, he focused his attention on the devilish woman kneeling in front of Watson. What's going on? The Purgatory skeleton has turned into a living Hell Baron? Moriarty did not care that he had been stripped of the Purgatory skeleton and fell into weakness. Instead, he stared at the devil woman kneeling in front of Watson. The Purgatory skeleton was discovered in a ruin in the center of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, on the body of the Hell Baron. According to his theory, it was an ancient ruin from 10,000 years ago, with numerous runes inscribed on it. Even though he could not comprehend the runes, he could tell that the story he penned was about the Hell Barons. There were a few murals adjacent to the runes, especially on the wall. There were a few angels in the murals with white wings on their bodies and halos on their heads. They were besieging a horde of demons with 6 arms and 2 horns on their heads. The angels were surrounded by heavenly flames, while the demons roared inaudibly. The scene was horrifying. Moriarty had little knowledge about the murals. He only brought back the Hell Baron's bones. Even though the ruins were suppressed, the bones had survived for tens of thousands of years. It was clear that the bones held some secret. He had dripped the demon's blood onto the Hell Baron's bone marrow while researching it. He discovered that the Hell Baron's bone marrow could self-evolve. He buried the goldbiter rats that had consumed the Hell Baron's bone marrow. He also brought many magical beasts for the goldbiter rats for their consumption, which resulted in the liquid for the magical beast's evolution. He subsequently turned the remains into a breeding ground for the goldbiter rats, and that had emptied the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. The Hell Baron's blood could record knowledge. That was what he had discovered in his studies. After all, the Hell Barons were smarter than humans, therefore, he did not find it unusual. However, he had never imagined that his capacity to record knowledge could be used to resurrect a corpse that had been dead for 10,000 years. He really wanted to know how Watson did it. Why could that little devil perform something that he had been researching for almost 10 years but could not do? He realized, though, that it was not the time to get into that. The Hell Baron's strength was considerably beyond that of humans, as they were an ancient species. The lovely demon had an aura that showed she was at the peak of the platinum tier. Furthermore, Watson had 3 people on his side. He was in a vulnerable situation. If that went on for too long, he might not be able to escape. His studies at the border had been almost flawless, but there was a flaw at the end. That Watson is too monstrous. He might affect His Majesty's plans in the future. We can't leave him alive. He was terrified by the strength and talent that Watson had demonstrated. He resolved to inform His Majesty of all that had occurred after he left that location. He would urge the king to go to the border and rid the kingdom of that scourge. Half of his body had already vanished into the abyss. He accelerated his departure at that point. Only his arm remained on the outside. Why did 2 platinum tier items produce a person instead of an item when fused? Moriarty's heart was filled with questions. At that moment, Watson had the same question as well. Platinum tier Hell Baron Lord, Lilith. As the lord of the former Hell Barons, Lilith's strength was at the diamond tier. However, she had been dead for tens of thousands of years, so her energy had dissipated. At that moment, Lilith's strength was peak platinum tier. She could only regain her strength gradually after collecting enough energy. 6 arms punishment, super self-healing, demon blood boiling, super physical resistance, super magic resistance, demon king, loss of pain. Additional abilities. Super berserk. Ability is significantly increased in a short period, but rationality is slightly decreased. Instant burst. All the energy in the body is instantly poured at the price of lowering one's level of strength. Seductive body. Body movements, including voice, will have a bewitching effect, with reduced the impact on those with a strong will. Additional skills. Platinum tier demonic elemental spell, creeping hunger, the million disease spread, and the soul-sucking voice from hell. Gold tier demonic elemental spell, flesh recombination, strong parasitism, and imp summoning. Loyalty. The demon is completely loyal to its host, so feel free to use it. Watson was not pleased with the qualities that were shown to him. Although the revived Hell Baron was more powerful than a pure platinum tier item and possessed numerous new skills, those talents were not his. His first plan was to combine 2 platinum tier items to create a more powerful item to help him. That sensation was similar to fusing a phoenix egg. The egg shattered after the fusion, revealing a weapon. Although the outcome was satisfactory, it was not what he had wanted. Can I transform it back into something that has already been fused? System? Reminder that the system is a fusion system and does not possess the ability to disassemble. Watson sighed. That's it then. It was not too bad to get a peak platinum tier warrior for free. If others had known what he was thinking at the time, they would have assumed he was insane. He was dissatisfied with having a platinum tier warrior. He was the only person in the world who could articulate such feelings. He collected his thoughts and calculated in his heart. The demon's blood and purgatory skeleton that he had obtained from Moriarty had been wasted. He was a little reluctant. He did not know if he could continue to get them again from Moriarty or perhaps Lilith. After he thought about it for a moment, a bright light suddenly flashed in his mind, and a bold idea emerged. The system could only fuse and not dismantle. He did not want Lilith, so perhaps he could continue to fuse her? With that thought in mind, Watson looked at Moriarty and found that half of Moriarty's body had entered the black hole. He narrowed his eyes and said, "System, I'm going to initiate the fusion. The fusion targets are Moriarty and Lilith. Congratulations, Master, on a successful fusion. The Hell Baron servant, Lilith's strength has increased." Moriarty, who had already entered the black hole, was forcefully yanked out by an invisible force as the system's voice sounded in Watson's consciousness. His body disintegrated swiftly and became a stream of light. His face was filled with horror before he could shout as the light merged into Lilith's body. Lilith's body got a little taller after the fusion. Her 5 senses shifted from seductive to dignified and lovely. Her aura grew stronger, and her skin lightened significantly. The scarlet horns on top of her head and the tail on her back had shrunk. If one did not look closely, one would not notice that Lilith resembled a person rather than a demon. After the fusion with Moriarty, Lilith's body shook, and there was something in her eyes. A world-shaking aura appeared in her eyes, and she respected Watson even more. At the same time, a shiny quill floated in the air and flew toward Watson. Platinum tier item. Pen of Truth. Effect. Anything said in front of the Pen of Truth must not be a lie and must not be omitted, or you will suffer the pain of having your blood sucked out. Additional effect. Rewriting reality. Anything written in the Pen of Truth will come true. If it is something that has not happened, then it will definitely happen. However, no one knows what form it will take. Not bad. Now the problem is completely solved. Watson took the Pen of Truth and nodded in satisfaction. He did not need to expend any effort to obtain benefits from Moriarty at all. He could just fuse Moriarty, and Lilith could inherit his ability as a mage. Then, Watson could extract any excess demon's blood and purgatory skeleton from Lilith. Moriarty could not escape either. It was like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. There was, however, a disadvantage. The system would only inherit the fused person's talents, not their memories. Watson had planned to question Moriarty about why he went to the border, why he destroyed the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, why he nursed those magical beasts, and his relationship with the monarch. Moriarty, on the other hand, was extremely powerful. Watson might not be able to stop him if he tried to flee. Therefore he had no choice but to do that. Watson will just have to investigate the truth gradually. As he considered that, Watson raised his head to find Sylvan and Antonio. They hid quite far from him, and they had a peculiar look on their faces as if they were looking at a scary monster. "Master, Lord Sylvan, what happened to you? Why are you standing so far away?" Watson asked. He was somewhat puzzled. "Watson, you still have the nerve to ask that? Do you know what you just did?" Sylvan swallowed his saliva and spoke with difficulty. Watson had just broken through Moriarty's defense, which they had been unable to breach, and transformed the Hell Baron's corpse into a living demonic beauty. That was nothing. They were merely astounded to discover that Watson had fused Moriarty. That was extremely frightening. Moriarty was a peak platinum tier elite, on par with them. Previously, they were aware that Watson possessed fusion magic, but they were unconcerned when he fused some low-quality items. They were terrified when they discovered Watson could fuse a platinum tier elite. They were also platinum tier elites. What if Watson fused them when he was unhappy? Chapter 207. Fusing with the Goldbiter Rats. "Watson, be honest. How do you think I treat you normally?" Antonio stroked his white beard and smiled. "You treat me very well, Master. What's wrong?" Watson scratched his head in confusion. "No, I have treated you badly." Antonio's decisive reply made Watson a little dumbfounded. He saw Antonio pat his chest with a pained expression. "I have to admit that I hid something from you in the past. You were very talented, and when I told you that you could only learn 2 spells in a week, that was a lie. I was afraid that I'd lose my dignity if you were to finish your apprenticeship too quickly, so I said that. I will never hide anything from you again. I will teach you everything you want to learn." Watson was speechless. Watson's lips moved, unable to fathom why Antonio would suddenly say such a thing, but before he could open his mouth, he noticed Sylvan's cheeks quivered as he followed suit. "Watson, I have not treated you well either. I've suppressed Black Moon Castle, and I am currently fighting with you over exploration rights to the ruins. I am sorry for what I did. You can have all the ruins. The Fairy Castle and Black Moon Castle are one and the same. We are family. You won't vent your anger on me because of my previous actions, right?" Previously, both Antonio and Sylvan believed that even if Watson possessed platinum-tier strength, he was still a youngster and could never be their opponent. However, it seemed like that was not the case. Watson could fuse with a platinum-tier elite with a wave of his palm. They still did not know what that weird power was, and they lacked the confidence to fight it. Maybe Watson did not kill them not because he was not powerful enough but because he was kind-hearted. During the fight between Black Moon Castle and the Mage Guild, Antonio had seen Watson fused Audrey with a maid. He had not paid much attention to it at the time, but he broke out in a cold sweat when he thought about it then. What if Watson had fused with him instead of Audrey? "You lowly humans, isn't it too late to curry favor with my master?" Lilith rose from the ground with a soul-stirring smile on her face after the fusion. She went slowly toward Antonio and Sylvan and said, "You have no right to stand by my master's side. I am the only one who has the authority to stand by his side. You are too much of a blight on the landscape. You should die here." Lilith's mockery elicited a look of rage on Sylvan and Antonio's faces. What was their social standing? One was the border count, and the other was the kingdom's greatest mage. The Hell Baron in front of them had only been a corpse half an hour ago. They would have taught Lilith a lesson if Watson were not there. They would not dare to do that with him there. "Wait, Lilith, these are my friends. The one on the right is my master. You are not allowed to touch them." Watson halted Lilith in time without waiting for her to make a move. "Friends? Master?" Lilith's face was filled with skepticism. "I am not sure why you chose to befriend such a lowly creature, Great Lord. Could it be out of pity?" "Lilith, what lowly creature? You should know that I'm also a human." "No, Master, you're completely different from these lowly humans. I can sense the presence of a stronger creature beneath your human appearance. It doesn't seem to be from this world, it's the presence of another starry sky." Lilith moved closer to Watson's side. Her delicate nose twitched before her face revealed an intoxicated expression. "Stop." He could smell Lilith's unique body fragrance. Watson made a stop sign, and his face had turned red. He was not embarrassed because of the beautiful woman beside him. He felt guilty because his concerns had been exposed. His soul had come from another world. He did not expect Lilith to detect it. It was as one would expect of an ancient race. Watson took a close look at Antonio and Sylvan and noticed that their expressions remained unchanged. That made him feel better. Antonio and Sylvan thought Lilith admired Watson because he had mastered the God's Descent spell and the Great Sin transformation skill. They did not think of anything else because he had the potential to reach higher tiers. "Let us not get into that right now, Watson. I have a couple of spells that I believe are ideal for you. If it is more convenient for you, I will teach you right now. You will be able to learn any spells you wish in the future. I will teach you whatever you want to know as long as it is something I know." Antonio rubbed his hands and began to approach Watson. "What's mine is yours, and what's yours is still yours. If there's anything that Black Moon Castle needs, feel free to tell me. I've also stocked up on a large number of weapons and medicinal herbs in the Fairy Castle. Just say the word, and I'll immediately inform my subordinates to send them to Black Moon Castle." Sensing Antonio and Sylvan's overly enthusiastic attitude toward him, Watson could roughly guess the reason. Perhaps he had just fused with Moriarty's technique and frightened the two platinum-tier elites, which made him not know whether to laugh or cry. The strength of the system fusion lay in its mandatory nature. No magic or combat aura could resist it, but it was not unlimited. Watson could surmise the cause of Antonio and Sylvan's overly enthusiastic attitude toward him. Perhaps it was because he had fused Moriarty, and that had terrified the two platinum-tier elites. He did not know whether to laugh or to cry. The system fusion's power relied upon its essentials. It was impervious to spells or combat auras, but it was not limitless. As the target of the first fusion, the material that Watson fused could not be stronger than him. That was also the reason he had to compromise during his fight with the Mage Guild. He was only at the gold tier then, so he could not fuse with a platinum tier elite. Otherwise, he would have fused Antonio with one of his subordinates, and they would not be there that day. Moriarty was another example. If Watson had not advanced to Platinum Tier and stolen Moriarty's Devil's Blood and Purgatory skeleton, then his strength would not have plummeted from Diamond to Platinum Tier, and Watson would not have been able to fuse him. The system fusion could be seen as a weapon that could forcefully kill Watson to prevent him from escaping when his strength surpassed his opponent's. That weapon could not allow him to fight against enemies of a higher level. You said you would teach me everything in the future, Master. You must keep your word. I want to study a variety of spells. One of them is the black hole spell that you had just cast. Furthermore, Lord Sylvan, you stated that you would provide free weapons and medicinal herbs for the Black Moon Castle. You won't go back on your words, right? Of course. Antonio and Sylvan nodded almost at the same time. That is great. Actually, my fusion magic is not all powerful. It can only be used against persons who are weaker than me. Moriarty was in a vulnerable state right now, so I succeeded in that. I would not be as confident if it were you, Master, or Lord Sylvan. It would be far more difficult for me to succeed if the two of you cast the time-stripping spell. Watson did not want his master and Sylvan to be afraid of him all the time, so he explained it to them. However, after they heard his words, Antonio and Sylvan looked at each other. Antonio coughed. He was the first to speak. Watson, I think it's better for you to learn 2 spells every week. You can't bite off more than you can chew. As for the black hole spell, it is profound earth elemental magic. It's very difficult for you to understand it now. Watson curled his lips. His master had just said that he was very talented. Why did he change his mind? Even though the Dragonspine Snow Mountain had collapsed and the Misty Forest was destroyed, a large number of those rats had escaped. Those magical beasts are even more powerful than the magical beasts in the Misty Forest. To resist those magical beasts, we would need weapons and armor. Therefore, Watson, the matter of providing resources to Black Moon Castle for free has to be temporarily put on hold. Sylvan also looked away. He did not want to see Watson's angry expression. 2 famous big shots in the kingdom are going back on their words and lying to a kid like me. Aren't you shameful? Antonio and Sylvan's expressions immediately changed when they learned that the fusion spell could not be used on them. It was faster than flipping through a book. That made Watson very regretful. If he had known earlier, he would not have told them about the drawbacks of the fusion system. He calmed the raging feelings in his heart by taking a deep breath. Despite his rage, Sylvan's words were reasonably rational. The goldbiter rats that had escaped from the Dragonspine Snow Mountain were more dangerous than other ordinary magical beasts because they would multiply after they ate. Furthermore, those rats appeared to merge into a more powerful being, similar to the heaven-devouring Rat King beside Moriarty. Speaking of the heaven-devouring Rat King, it seems like it is missing. Watson looked around and saw no sign of the heaven-devouring Rat King. He had been so preoccupied with Moriarty's fusion that he had forgotten about the magical beast. It would be extremely tough to detect a platinum-tier magical beast if it wanted to hide from them. The most effective method was to dig 3 feet into the ground. Watson expanded his combat aura wings and landed at the foot of the collapsed Dragonspine Snow Mountain without hesitation. He extended his right hand to the group of goldbiter rats still fleeing the snow mountain in all directions. System fusion, activate. At the same time, in a forest more than 10 kilometers to the west of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. Above the woodland, a massive black hole had emerged in the sky. A rat, the size of a palm, crawled out of it, panting, and landed on the ground. It took a careful glance around, and when it saw no one had caught up with it, the rat stood up straight like a human. A hint of wisdom flashed across its platinum eyes as it began to speak in human language. That was close. I almost died there. Fortunately, I had been prepared. I used a demon's blood skill to copy my memories into the body of the heaven-devouring Rat King. I can still resurrect my memories even if I lose my body, the rat muttered. The light in its eyes distorted into hatred and fear. Watson, I shall remember you. The scene of Watson using a strange spell to kill him was still vivid in his mind. He dared to say that it was the strangest spell he had ever seen in his life. There was no chanting or strong fluctuations. It only brings death silently. Watson's use of a bizarre spell to kill him was still fresh in his thoughts. He dared to remark it was the oddest spell he had ever witnessed in his life. There was no chanting or significant fluctuation, it simply brought death quietly. It's a pity that my body, which I had worked so hard to evolve for 10 years, died just like that. But that doesn't matter. I have a better choice now, and that is Watson's body. Watson's strange magic worried him, yet he desired it at the same time. He would not have an opponent in the entire kingdom if he could master that kind of magic. That little brat definitely would not expect me to survive, much less that I would wait for an opportunity to seize his body. The most important thing now is to find a human body that can be of use to me. As soon as the voice stopped, the rat turned around and raced in the direction of Monty Town. Chapter 208. I will rule the borders. Silver tier synthetic magical beasts. 6-winged goldbiter rats. Abilities. Rapid devouring, common sense, rapid flight. Additional abilities. Natural selection, infinite splitting. Additional skills. Silver tier magic, dark cut. Compared to bronze tier goldbiter rats, the silver tier goldbiter rats were created by fusing 10 regular goldbiter rats. When compared to common goldbiter rats, they had the added abilities of rapid flying and dark cut. A single goldbiter rat's ability was relatively poor in comparison to the silver tier magical beasts of the same level. Still, those magical beasts could not endure a large number of goldbiter rats. Tens of thousands of silver tier 6-winged goldbiter rats circled Watson and released the dark cut ability. They were even slaughtering their own kind. Their 6 pitch black wings drew dark rays of light, and the light beams crisscrossed to form a vast black net. The ravines, which were already plagued with holes, were heavily covered, became even messier. Half an hour had passed since Watson fused Moriarty. In that half an hour, he had fused more than half of the goldbiter rats near the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, and a small portion had fled to the border. During that process, he discovered something significant. All goldbiter rats shared the same consciousness. He had, by all appearances, used the technique to replace the awareness of the fused goldbiter rats. All of the goldbiter rats should have been under his control, but those that escaped had a strong will to oppose him. Furthermore, that state of consciousness felt incredibly familiar to him. Did that consciousness belong to the heaven-devouring Rat King? Watson was puzzled. He had initially intended to utilize the system to fuse the goldbiter rats. Then, he could control all the other goldbiter rats by randomly controlling one of them. It would not harm the border in any way. Instead, it would be his subordinate's assistance. However, it seemed like that method would not work anymore. Those little rats appear to contain some cells as well as some unusual components. They will continue to divide as long as they eat something. It is undoubtedly a great attribute to food. The person who created that is a genius. Lilith was standing close to Watson. She pinched a 6-winged goldbiter rat with 2 slender fingers. Then, she slipped the rat into her mouth and began chewing as she talked. Her crimson lips were flushed with blood, giving her a seductive appearance. Soon after, she spat out a couple of gnawed clean bones. She commented, "It does not taste nice. I should have seasoned it with salt and pepper." They eat live rats? As expected of one from the ancient race. No matter how strong they are, one could not change their characteristics. Sylvan frowned. He was uncomfortable with the thought of raw meat. He was born with a sense of superiority as a long-lived and gorgeous elf. Furthermore, Lilith had just ridiculed him and Antonio as inferior, so he could not help but react. "Do you have any concerns about my conduct, inferior humans? The strength of a race is not determined by what you consume. Eating raw meat can help to preserve the food's most primal energy and boost its power. For tens of thousands of years, the inferior human race has only bothered about minor issues. They have no idea how to increase their power. I am surprised that you have not changed after tens of thousands of years." Lilith wiped the blood off the corners of her mouth and looked at Sylvan. "Oh, right, I can tell you are not a human, but rather an elf. You are not even as good as a human. Elves, as I recall, were the offspring of a tree-dwelling species who were persecuted by other races and compelled to live in trees. You have a coward's blood coursing through your veins. Tens of thousands of races had lived on that land in ancient times. Perhaps it was an exaggeration, but it was certainly more than what they had at that moment: angels, demons, giants, dragons, and other mighty races. There were also the weaker species like the humans and other arboreal species. Do you want to fight me?" The corner of Sylvan's mouth twitched when his bloodline was insulted. No matter how well-mannered he was furious with that remark. Let's fight then. Don't beg for mercy when you're defeated. Lilith was determined not to be outdone. All right. Stop bickering, Antonio said as he waved his hand and stepped up to smooth things over. With the destruction of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain, a significant number of Goldbiter rats had been freed. There will be no peace at the border if those man-made magical beasts are permitted to spread havoc. Watson is the only one in charge of those rats right now. He will not be able to handle all of them on his own. Why don't you tackle the problem in front of us first, if you have the time to argue? Who are you to order me around? Lilith laughed coldly. I forgot to mention you just now. I heard that you are my honorable master's master. How can a lowly human become someone else's master? Instead of letting you teach him, why don't I do it instead? Of course, I'm not saying that my strength is enough to teach my master, but I don't want to see my master's body tainted with a lowly aura. FCK. Antonio was about to curse. He had wanted to arbitrate the conflict, but he had no idea Lilith would curse him as well. Why did it matter if he were Watson's master? Even if Watson was exceptional, would he have advanced to the platinum tier so rapidly if he had not been Watson's master? Lilith's derogatory remarks were an insult to him. She could question his strength, but he would not let her trample on his dignity. Sylvan and Antonio were like Emperor Cluck when it was ready to fight. They rubbed their fists and got ready to attack Lilith. Watson could not stand it anymore. He sighed. Lilith, I told you. One of them is my master, and the other is the border count in charge of this territory. You have to be more respectful to them and not cause trouble for me. Otherwise, I won't take you in. All right, young Master Watson. For your sake, I'll be a little more polite to them. Lilith panicked when she realized Watson did not want her and replied to him respectfully. I've already fused the majority of the Goldbiter rats at the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. I will travel to other parts of the border to find the remaining Goldbiter rats. I have a strange feeling in my heart, even if I do not know where they are right now. He could not sense the particular thoughts of the other consciousnesses since the Goldbiter rats had two consciousnesses, but he could determine the other party's location. He assumed that the other party felt the same way. It was like a cat and mouse game. He was the cat, while the other party was a rat that had no choice but to flee. As one would expect from my most exceptional disciple. Since that is the case, let us move quickly and take action. Antonio gave his approval with a thumbs up. Sylvan heaved a sigh of relief and turned to face Watson. Watson, please allow me to discuss this with you. The fairy castle is essential for border protection. We simply can't afford to lose it. Let us clean up the Goldbiter rats near the fairy castle first, okay? At that moment, he no longer saw Watson as a chess pawn. Instead, he was someone that he could cling to in his hours of need. Watson was only a 10-year-old child, and he had claimed the boy as his son. That was how he interpreted the situation. I can go to the fairy castle first, but I have one condition. What is it? I want to rule the border. What did you say? Are you sure you want to rule the border? Sylvan's ears twitched as if he had misheard the child. Watson wanted to rule the border, so where would that leave him? Lord Sylvan, you did not hear me wrongly. I want to rule the border. Watson's young face was full of seriousness as he said, there are still some missing things in the border under your reign. Many horrible things had happened because I had been weak. So, now I want to rule the border and make this place stronger. Of course, I can't do that without Lord Sylvan's help. With the convenience of the fusion system, he could expand the border in a few years, but that would be too long. He wanted Sylvan to command and merge the other towns, including Monty Town, with Black Moon Castle. Watson had believed that by becoming stronger, he would allow his family to live a happy life without any threats. Unfortunately, he was mistaken. Someone had destroyed the Dragonspine Snow Mountain right in front of Sylvan. It felt like a pair of invisible hands had covered the sky and suffocated him. Sylvan twitched his lips as he noticed Watson was serious. In the past, if he had heard Watson's comments, he would have promptly summoned his magic. However, Sylvan sighed as he noticed Lilith staring at him. It was not that he was afraid. He simply did not want to argue with Watson for no reason. Furthermore, Watson's words made sense. He had allowed someone to ruin the Dragonspine Snow Mountain right in front of him. He had failed in his responsibilities. Even the king's emissaries had not discovered it. How could he exact their revenge? Watson, you are the first person who dares to speak to me like that. I have to say that you are very brave. I will not hold it against you for the sake of our master. I will only ask you one thing. What benefits will I receive if I agree to your request? First and foremost, Lord Sylvan, you will remain the nominal ruler of the border. Second, I will make the fairy castle 10, if not 100, times stronger than it is now. Is this acceptable? Deal. Sylvan paused for a moment before nodding. He would have laughed if Watson had used such comments in the past. However, the young man was qualified to make such a guarantee. Watson, since you have already made a decision, then I need to remind you that Sylvan and the king have always been on bad terms. The king might have something to do with the destruction of the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. It's clear that he doesn't want the border to have any power. If you merge the towns there, it will pique his interest. Are you sure you want to do that? It meant Watson would go against the entire Holy Dragon Kingdom. I don't care about the king. I will punish whoever threatens the safety of my family. Even if he is the king, I will drag him down from that position. Watson's voice was not loud, but every word was decisive. I will rule the borders now, and I will rule the kingdom in the future. The oath he made floated in the air. If he could not protect his family as the ruler of the border, then he would do it as the kingdom's ruler. He did not believe that anyone would dare to hurt his family and friends then. Lilith looked at Watson in admiration, as if she was fascinated by his declaration. Sylvan and Antonio looked at each other as if they did not expect Watson to say such bold words. Then, Antonio seemed to have thought of something, and his expression changed. Wait, Watson, take back your words. Unfortunately, it was too late. The moment he made the oath, the platinum tier tool, the pen of truth, which Watson had just received, suddenly shone and floated in front of him. It wrote his words in red ink in the air as if it wanted to tell the truth from the falsehood of his words. Chapter 209. The Pen of Truth or the Pen of Disaster. The Pen of Truth was one of the most famous platinum tier items in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. Even though it did not have a powerful attack, it was more useful in some aspects than an attack elemental item. For example, its ability to detect lies. The Pen of Truth could detect and punish any liars in front of it. In addition, it was not the host who activated that power but the pen itself. It would have a sudden test when one was in a good mood. Sometimes the Pen of Truth would force the host to a test, especially when someone made a significant declaration. For example, Watson made a declaration that he would rule the kingdom in the future. Antonio knew about the Pen of Truth, but it was too late to stop Watson from saying that. Unfortunately, the Pen of Truth had been triggered, and it was prepared to judge Watson. I am not only going to be the ruler of the border's ruler, but I will rule the kingdom too. Pen of Truth wrote Watson's words in the void. The shining red words gleamed, then the words shattered. The Pen of Truth flew straight to his hand. Antonio's face darkened, and Sylvan sighed. Sylvan had also heard of the Pen of Truth. It belonged to the royal family and was used to judge criminals and corrupt nobles. He guessed that Moriarty was one of the king's men, and he knew that when he saw the Pen of Truth. He thought that the pen would conclude Watson's words as lies, and the young man would have his flesh dug out until he admitted that he was lying. Even though he was a border count and had a deep hatred for the king, he was not sure that he could be the kingdom's supreme. Watson was only a little over 10 years old, and he only had Black Moon Castle behind him. How could he fight against the Empire? Antonio thought the same, so he did not help. Firstly, the Pen of Truth was absolutely effective, and he could not stop it. Secondly, it was good to let Watson know how arrogant he had sounded. Even if Watson had mastered a mysterious spell that could fuse a platinum tier elite, he should not have been overly confident. Just as both of them thought about it, something unexpected happened. The Pen of Truth flew to Watson's side. It did not pierce his arm as the two had expected. Instead, the pen was slightly bent, like a cute kitten. It gently rubbed against Watson's arm, and he snapped his hand backward. Stop rubbing against me, it's itchy. What had happened? Antonio and Sylvan's eyes widened. The Pen of Truth did not suck Watson's blood, which meant that it had agreed with Watson's words. Could he really ascend as the kingdom's supreme in the future? Would that really happen? Perhaps the pen was wrong? Sylvan had a thought in his mind and tentatively said, I am making a statement. I will be the Holy Dragon Kingdom's supreme in the future. Whoosh! Almost as soon as he finished speaking, the pen of truth turned into a straight arrow and left Watson's arm. It landed on Sylvan's palm and drilled into it like a drill. The blood and flesh splattered. The pain made him gasp. I will make a statement again. I am lying. I will not become the Holy Dragon Kingdom's emperor. Then, the pen of truth left Sylvan's palm. The tip had absorbed the blood before it returned to Watson. It used the blood to write a line of words in the air. My beloved master, you are the future ruler of this kingdom. Someone just lied to me and tried to infringe on my authority, so I punished him a little. Did I do the right thing? That pen was poisonous. Sylvan cast a healing spell on his injured palm. He stared at the pen of truth with a face full of hatred. He did not mind if the pen wanted to judge him, but why did the pen of truth treat him and Watson so differently? That was unfair. What can you do? Watson asked. If I judged something to be true, I could achieve it. Wait, Watson. Antonio interrupted them. The pen of truth has two abilities. One is to detect lies, and the other is to rewrite reality. The latter is one of the reasons why it has become a platinum tier item. The other reason is that it is different from other platinum tier items. It has self-awareness. The ability to rewrite reality is terrifying. It can also resurrect the dead and turn the poor into billionaires. However, you have to understand one thing. The pen of truth is only a platinum tier item. It cannot fulfill a strong wish. Therefore, if a wish exceeds a limit, it will be distorted. I have the same opinion as Master. There was once a great noble in the kingdom who wanted to become richer. So, I asked His Majesty for that pen of truth to rewrite reality. In the end, he did become wealthy. The source of the money was the pension His Majesty gave him when his son was killed by bandits when he was out. There was also a person who cultivated slowly but wanted to achieve more, but he was merged into a monster in the end. He was strong, but he lost his sense of self. Sylvan looked at Watson and said, so you understand now. The pen of truth is not that convenient. Some people even call it the pen of disaster. I understand. Watson nodded. He looked at the pen of truth that floated in front of him. So, are you the pen of disaster? Sylvan almost fell. How could he ask such a straightforward question? Even the pen of truth could not admit it. Master, you have misunderstood me. I am not the pen of disaster. I am a pen of good luck that will bring happiness to you. My beloved master, is there anything you need me to do? Help me deal with the goldbiter rats that are endangering the border. It was not that Watson did not believe Sylvan's words. He just wanted to give it a try after he saw how respectful the pen of truth was. I'm sorry, Master. You seem to have misunderstood my ability. I can't fulfill your wish. Whatever you want to do, you must do it yourself. If you want to rewrite reality, then you must start with a statement and specify the time and place of what you want to do. The more accurate, the better. I will let fate take the path that you have envisioned. If what you have said can't be fulfilled, then you must restate it. If you do not elaborate, you must add a statement. It's so troublesome. I think I'll pass. At first, Watson thought that the pen of truth's ability to rewrite reality was similar to the wish for the world ring, which could help him achieve his wish. It seemed like the two are different. The ring would satisfy his request directly. On the other hand, the pen of truth was to change the world and make the world meet his expectations. It's no trouble, Master. You don't have to say ritualistic words like the beginning of a statement. I will also help you rewrite reality. Really? Then let me try. At that moment, Watson could sense that the pen of truth wanted to flatter him. He said, 3 months from now, when winter has ended, I will personally solve the problem with the goldbiter rats in front of Black Moon Castle's gate. He had wanted to make a wish and solve the problem with the goldbiter rats. However, Antonio and Sylvan said that the pen of truth was dangerous, and he could not make a wish that exceeded its scope. Therefore, he decided to be more prudent and extended the time. Of course, my master. Your words are entirely effective. The world in 3 months will be as you wish. As the price for fate, I need to draw a small amount of blood. That is also the way to maintain my operation. I believe you will not be stingy. Come. Watson presented his arm and generously let the pen of truth draw blood from it. It was not difficult to solve the problem with the goldbiter rats in 3 months. The pen of truth should not need to draw much blood. Then I won't be courteous, Master. After it wrote those scarlet words in midair, the pen of truth did not land on Watson's arm to draw his blood. Instead, it flew rapidly, landed on Lilith's body not far away, and pierced her arm. Lilith did not even have a chance to cry out in surprise before the pen of truth flew to Antonio and Sylvan's side and pierced their bodies. It was not until the pen was soaked in blood that it burped and returned to Watson's side. "What's going on?" Lilith was confused. Antonio and Sylvan looked at each other in confusion. The pen of truth mentioned that it would absorb blood. They had thought that it would absorb Watson's blood, but it did not. How can a lowly servant like me absorb the blood of a great master? You should feel honored to be able to help Master realize his wishes by offering your blood. Master, did I do it right? What the hell? How could a pen be so cheap? Antonio widened his eyes in anger. As the greatest mage in the kingdom, was his blood not as precious as Watson's? The pen of truth did not respect the royal family even though it had belonged to them. However, it was very polite toward Watson. Even Lilith, the Hell Baron, had great respect for Watson. Was it because Watson had mastered fusion magic, or was he a natural king with a temperament that could make people submit to him? Watson also thought that it was unbelievable. He could understand why Lilith respected him. It was most likely because it was his fusion magic. He did not know why the pen of truth liked him so much. It was not the time to dwell on that. Watson waved his hand at his angry master and Sylvan. "Master, Lord Sylvan, let's put the matter aside. Why don't we meet up with Miss Nightingale and then go back to Black Moon Castle to discuss our plans? In return for the pen of truth taking your blood, I will give you a hybrid phoenix egg to help your recovery. Is that all right?" Chapter 210. Spend a lot of money. Monty Town. Almost 20 days had passed since the winter had started. Monty Town had changed dramatically since half a month ago. First, the wall outside the town had grown from more than 10 meters to over 100 meters in height. If one looked closely, one would notice that the outermost wall was not a wall but a giant rock golem that stood 100 meters tall. There were 24 giant rock golems in total. On each side of the wall, there was an average of 6 giant rock golems. A new line of defense had been constructed between the giant rock golems and Monty Town's city wall. Inside, there were simple wooden houses. The bodies of magical beasts that had been devoured were strewn about, and thousands of magical beasts with a silver aura patrolled the area. They would occasionally run to the side of the wooden house and pick up a piece of meat from inside. The mayor of Monty Town, Geraint, had purchased all of those magical beasts from the Black Moon Castle some time ago, including the giant rock golems. The meat in those magical beasts' mouths came from wild magical beasts that had escaped from the misty forest. The first month of winter was about to end. Not only did the number of magical beasts outside the town not increase, but the number had dwindled too. Sometimes, one could not even see one for a few days. If it were not for the constant snowfall and the blood-red moon in the sky, Monty Town residents might wonder if they were really in the middle of winter. Some of Monty Town's brave residents had already left town to conduct business. At that moment, there was a caravan of more than 10 people at the Monty Town gate. They were driving a carriage, and their destination was Black Moon Castle. The leader was a middle-aged man with a handlebar mustache. He was holding a bottle of crystal-clear red wine in his hand. He opened the cork of the bottle and took a gulp. Then, he exhaled longly. "It feels so good. In previous years, I would usually be surrounded by magical beasts during the winter. There's no way I could take a sip of wine like this. Whatever the price was for the wine, it would skyrocket. It would be hard for me to even take a bite of meat. Now, the wine that I have been saving for years is only sold for 1 silver coin." The middle-aged man examined the 2 letters MG, which were written in the Holy Dragon Kingdom's language, and the black moon symbol above the bottle. Black Moon Castle's logo was a black crescent moon. It meant that the bottle of wine was produced by Morgan Manor, a subordinate of Black Moon Castle. "Leader, the wine is so cheap because there are no magical beasts this winter, and Black Moon Castle makes it. I heard that Black Moon Castle has mastered some cutting-edge technology that can transform low-quality materials into high-quality goods. Many businesses have left Monty Town for Black Moon Castle as they wanted to trade with them, particularly the Lucky Business Group and the Traveling Wind Business Group. Their leaders are said to be old friends of Black Moon Castle." A curly-haired man, clearly a personal guard, sighed when he said that. He stood near the middle-aged man. His body radiated a bronze tear aura. The armor he wore and the sword he carried were both silver-tier tools. It was extremely rare for a bronze-tier warrior to be outfitted in silver-tier gear. Under normal circumstances, a complete set of bronze-tier equipment would suffice for a silver-tier warrior. That, however, was not the case in Monty Town. Since Black Moon Castle had brought many cheap and high-quality weapons, silver-tier equipment that would typically cost dozens of gold coins only cost a few gold coins. Furthermore, it was not as if they did not have a market for them. They were free to have as many as they wanted. The cost of gold-tier equipment was slightly higher. It would cost more than 100 gold coins, but it was still quite affordable. There was another sigh. The Lucky Business Group and the Traveling Wind Business Group are not particularly top tier in Monty Town. However, they are familiar with Black Moon Castle, so the two groups' financial resources have increased by at least 100-fold. It would be great if our group can be so lucky as well. The bronze-ranking guard sighed again. A few of his companions, who were in charge of leading the horses around, opened their mouths to speak at that moment. We can also consider ourselves fortunate to live in Monty Town. The magical beasts that appeared in the winter are more powerful than ever. We would not have survived if it had not been for Black Moon Castle. After putting an end to the problem with the magical beasts, Black Moon Castle dispatched people to distribute a large amount of resources to us for free. Those who had lost their families were given even more benefits. I heard that the wealthiest family received 100 gold coins. That amount of money is sufficient to support an ordinary family for 10 years. Some of those faces were filled with reverence when Black Moon Castle was mentioned. Exactly. There are 4 towns on the border. Other than Monty Town, the other 3 towns did not have an easy time during the winter. They did not have Black Moon Castle's help. My brother died in that battle. However, the people from Black Moon Castle used the giant rock golem to dig a grave and buried him. They even erected a monument to the heroes. Every time I leave the city, I see my brother's name. They are good people. His companion had the same expression. That's nothing. The most powerful thing Black Moon Castle did, in my opinion, was destroying the Dragonspine Snow Mountain during the day. I can still hear the loud bang as it collapsed. That was a natural moat-like mountain range. It is visible from anywhere along the border. We will never have to suffer another winter now that the natural moat has vanished. I heard that Black Moon Castle and the Border Count have a close relationship. Black Moon Castle's 8th young master is also the astrologer's disciple. It is not difficult to clear the misty forest and destroy the Dragonspine Snow Mountain with the assistance of 2 platinum-tier elites. The Dragonspine Snow Mountain was the natural moat that acted like a gate to the border to keep the Winter Nation at bay. I worry that they would attack us since the mountain had been destroyed. What would we do then? Some people were happy, while others were worried. Okay, let's not get into the peace treaty between the 5 kingdoms. If the Winter Nation had intended to attack, they would have done so a long time ago. Even the Dragonspine Snow Mountain would be ineffective against them. Furthermore, we have Black Moon Castle now. They would only grow stronger over time. I can't wait for them to launch an attack. The caravan's leader interrupted everyone's conversation. Rather than thinking about that nonsense, why don't we consider how to exchange more resources with Black Moon Castle? Leader is right. The group of people agreed politely and exited Monty Town. Everyone appeared to be at ease. Black Moon Castle had wiped out the magical beasts at the border, including the bandit gangs. Monty Town had been relatively quiet. They were not concerned about any dangers on the journey. What they did not notice was that the snowy ground they passed through shook a few times and cracked not long after they left. A black rat crawled out of the fissure, and its platinum eyes were fixed on the caravan. It licked its lips and made a hungry sound. In the end, it did not pursue them but instead slipped into Monty Town. First, I will get some food in Monty Town. Then I will look for a human body that can house my memories. Moriarty scanned his surroundings with the eyes of the heaven-devouring Rat King. He followed his memories after leaving the Dragonspine Snow Mountain and arrived at the nearest Monty Town. That was where he did the majority of his shopping. However, the town he remembered was no longer the same. He would leave the Dragonspine Snow Mountain every other year or so to buy the necessary materials. It had only been a year since he was last there. He was surprised by the number of shops on both sides of the street in Monty Town. There were a plethora of blacksmith shops, medicinal herb shops, and grocery stores. Furthermore, high-quality items were hung outside the door. For example, there were gleaming swords and sabers outside the blacksmith shop. They were all of the silver variety. There were silver tier herbs all over the walls outside the herb shop. They looked like climbing geckos. There was even a herb shop that was absurdly closed. The herbs that hung outside were not even gathered. They were left to bask in the sun as if they were unconcerned about thieves. How did Monty Town become so rich? Due to the damage to his soul from the battle with Watson, the best way to recover his soul was to use high-quality medicinal herbs. He thought he would need to expend all his effort to find the healing medicine after arriving in Monty Town. He did not expect that those medicines were all over the streets. As long as he swallowed those herbs that hung outside the wall, he would be able to recover most of them. He felt a pain in his head as he thought about it. A heavy object fell on his head with a dull thud. When he turned around, he saw an 8-year-old girl dressed in noble attire. She scowled. She was enraged at her mother. That is an obsidian gold dagger. It has a black and yellow color scheme. It is far too ugly. It does not appeal to me. I like Arcana Mithril. I want to use Arcana Mithril to make a new one. Be good, my little princess. Arcane Mithril is a silver tier metal. It is only good for making silver weapons. I have an obsidian gold dagger made for you, and it is of the gold tier. I don't care. I don't care. I just think it's ugly. Well, since you don't like it, then I don't want the dagger. I'll buy you a new one. The mother dragged her daughter away as she spoke, leaving Moriarty to stare at the obsidian gold dagger not far away from him. He was petrified. He could tell that it was a dagger made of obsidian gold, pure obsidian gold. It was regarded as the best gold tier weapon. A dagger of that caliber was worth at least 1,000 gold coins. How could they throw it away just like that? What had happened in Monty Town that would allow an ordinary noble to throw away something worth 1,000 gold coins so casually? Even prominent families in the kingdom's capital did not have such luxury. Had Monty Town discovered an underground gold mine? Even if it were a gold mine, the locals would not be so wealthy. At the very least, every family's courtyard would have to be buried with a gold mine.